a father broken by grief, a billionaire who sees beyond his pain. One question that changes everything. Daniel Brooks never thought he'd sit across from someone like Vanessa Hale, a woman whose world existed in boardrooms and penthouses while his was built from engine grease and bedtime stories. 4 years after burying his wife, he'd convinced himself that survival was enough, that protecting his son Oliver meant closing every door to his own heart. But when Vanessa asked the one question no one else dared to ask, the walls he'd spent years building began to crack. And what started as a single dinner became the story of how broken pieces can find their way back to wholeness. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this journey reaches. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday evening, turning the Seattle streets into rivers of reflected neon and blurred headlights. Daniel Brooks sat in his pickup truck outside Meridian, a restaurant he'd driven past 100 times but never entered. The kind of place where reservations were made weeks in advance and the wine list probably cost more than his monthly rent. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. He could still leave. Turn the key. Drive back to the small house where Mrs. Chen, his neighbor, was watching Oliver. Make up some excuse about a migraine or a work emergency. Vanessa would understand. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd be relieved. The thought made his stomach turn. Daniel checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, a face that looked older than 32, lines etched around eyes that had seen too much grief too young. He'd trimmed his beard that morning, put on the one dress shirt he owned that didn't have oil stains. The collar felt like a noose. "You're being ridiculous," he muttered to himself. But he wasn't. Not really. Because this wasn't just dinner. This was the first time in 4 years, since Sarah's funeral, since the world had collapsed into a before and after, that he'd agreed to meet someone. Actually meet someone, with intention and possibility hanging in the air like smoke. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, his best friend, and the man responsible for this entire situation. "Stop overthinking. She's cool. You're cool. It's just dinner. Go." Daniel almost laughed. Marcus had known Vanessa through some charity thing, mentioned Daniel in passing, great guy, mechanic, single dad. And somehow that had led to a phone number, a few cautious texts, and now this. Sitting outside a restaurant where the cheapest entree probably exceeded what he charged for a full engine diagnostic. Another text came through. Also, she's already inside. So unless you want to stand her up... "Damn it, Marcus," Daniel breathed. He grabbed his jacket, stepped out into the rain, and let the cold water shock some sense into him. By the time he pushed through Meridian's heavy glass doors, his shirt was dotted with rain and his heart was hammering against his ribs. The interior was exactly what he'd imagined. Dim lighting, modern art on exposed brick walls, tables spaced far enough apart that conversations remained private. Soft jazz played from speakers he couldn't see. Everything was elegant, understated, expensive. He didn't belong here. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" The host, a young woman with perfect posture and a practiced smile, appeared at his elbow. "Brooks, table for 2. "Ah, yes. Ms. Hale is already seated. Right this way." She led him through the restaurant, past couples leaning close over candlelight, past business dinners winding down with cognac and dessert. Daniel's boots, his good boots, the ones without paint splatters, felt too loud on the polished concrete floor. And then he saw her. Vanessa Hale sat at a corner table, backlit by the city lights visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. She wore a simple black dress, her dark hair pulled back, and she was reading something on her phone with the kind of focused attention that made the rest of the room fade away. She looked up as he approached. "Daniel." She smiled, setting her phone aside and standing to greet him. "I'm so glad you came." Her handshake was firm but warm. Up close, she was beautiful in a way that felt effortless. Minimal makeup, simple jewelry, nothing ostentatious despite the wealth Marcus had casually mentioned. "She runs a tech company, like a big one. Don't Google her before you go. Just be yourself." "Sorry I'm a little wet," Daniel said, shrugging off his jacket. "The rain is very Seattle," Vanessa finished, her smile widening. "Please sit." They settled into their seats. A server appeared immediately with water and menus, reciting specials Daniel barely heard over the sound of his own nervous breathing. When they were alone again, Vanessa folded her hands on the table and looked at him with eyes that were genuinely curious, not just polite. "I have to admit," she said, "when Marcus first mentioned you, I almost said no to this." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "Really? Blind dates aren't exactly my thing, and I know how awkward these setups can be." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "But then he told me a little about you, about what you do, about your son, and I thought, maybe this could be different. Maybe this could be real." The word real hung between them. Daniel picked up his water glass just to have something to do with his hands. "I haven't done this in a long time," he admitted. "Honestly, I almost didn't show up." "What changed your mind?" He thought about that. About Oliver asking him that morning why he looked nervous. About Mrs. Chen insisting he needed to live a little. About the way the house felt too quiet after Oliver went to bed, filled with the ghost of a life that would never come back. "I guess I got tired of being afraid," he said quietly. Vanessa's expression softened. "That's brave." "Is it?" "Because it doesn't feel brave. It feels like I'm betraying—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Sorry, that's way too heavy for a first date." "Is that what this is?" There was a teasing note in her voice, gentle enough to ease the tension in his shoulders. "I don't know what else to call it." "How about two people having dinner and seeing what happens?" Vanessa suggested. "No pressure, no expectations, just conversation." Daniel met her eyes and found something there that surprised him. Not pity, not the careful sympathy he'd grown so tired of, but genuine openness. Like she was willing to meet him exactly where he was, broken pieces and all. "I can do that," he said. The server returned and they ordered. Vanessa chose the salmon, Daniel went with the steak, both declining the wine list in favor of keeping clear heads. As the server left, Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting to the windows where rain streaked down glass. "Marcus mentioned you're a mechanic," she said. "How long have you been doing that?" Safe territory. Work. Daniel could talk about work. "About 10 years now. Started as an apprentice right out of high school. Worked my way up. Opened my own shop 3 years ago." He paused. "It's small, just me and one other guy, but it's mine." "That's impressive. Starting your own business takes guts. Or stupidity." Daniel smiled despite himself. "Some days I'm not sure which." "Both, probably. The best things usually require a little of each." Vanessa traced the rim of her water glass with one finger. "I started my company 8 years ago in a basement office with 2 employees and a lot of credit card debt. Now, we have 300 people across 5 cities, and there are still days I wake up terrified it's all going to fall apart." Daniel studied her. This woman who commanded boardrooms and managed millions, admitting to fear with the same casual honesty he might discuss a difficult engine repair. "What does your company do?" he asked. "We develop software for nonprofit organizations. Tools to help them manage donations, track outcomes, coordinate volunteers. Basically, we try to make it easier for good people to do good work." She shrugged. "It's not glamorous, but it matters." "Sounds pretty glamorous to me," says the man who can take apart an engine and put it back together. Vanessa's eyes held a glimmer of amusement. "I can barely change a light bulb. I'm terrible with computers, so we're even." They shared a smile, and Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. This was going better than he'd expected. Better than he'd dared hope. Vanessa wasn't what he'd imagined. There was no pretension, no sense that she was slumming it by having dinner with a blue-collar mechanic. She was just present, listening, actually interested. Their food arrived, steam rising from perfectly plated dishes. They ate and talked about safer things, favorite movies, places they'd like to travel, the strange politics of Seattle neighborhoods. Daniel found himself laughing at Vanessa's story about getting lost in Pike Place Market and accidentally joining a flash mob. "I swear, one minute I'm looking for flowers, the next I'm in the middle of a choreographed dance to September by Earth, Wind and Fire," she said, her own laughter making her eyes crinkle. "There's video somewhere. It's mortifying." "I would pay good money to see that." "Absolutely not. That footage is buried deeper than any corporate secret." The conversation flowed easily, naturally, like they'd known each other longer than 45 minutes. Daniel almost forgot to be nervous, almost forgot the weight he carried every day, the constant awareness that he was just one man trying to do the work of two parents. Almost. And then Vanessa set down her fork, took a sip of water, and asked the question that changed everything. "What's Oliver like?" The restaurant noise seemed to dim. Daniel's hand stilled halfway to his glass. Most people didn't ask about Oliver. Not on first dates, not in casual conversation. His son was the elephant in the room, the complication that made him less desirable in the dating market. People either avoided the subject entirely or asked obligatory questions before quickly steering back to neutral ground. But Vanessa's voice held no hesitation, no awkwardness, just genuine curiosity, warm and patient. Daniel swallowed. He's 5, just started kindergarten this year. That's a big step. Yeah, he was nervous about it, but he's doing great now. Made friends fast. His teacher says he's one of the most creative kids in class. Daniel felt himself relaxing as he talked, the way he always did when the subject was Oliver. He's obsessed with dinosaurs, like completely obsessed. Can name every species, knows which period they lived in, corrects me when I call a pterodactyl a dinosaur because technically it's a pterosaur. Vanessa laughed. He sounds brilliant. He is. Too smart for his own good sometimes. Daniel pulled out his phone, scrolling to a recent photo. This is him last week at the museum. They have this exhibit with animatronic dinosaurs, and he stood in front of the T-Rex for like 20 minutes just staring at it. He held out the phone. Vanessa took it carefully, studying the image of a small boy with Daniel's eyes and a gap-toothed smile, standing beneath a massive prehistoric creature with pure wonder on his face. "He's beautiful," she said softly, handing the phone back. "He has your smile." Something in Daniel's chest tightened. Everyone says that. The smile's mine. Everything else, the way he thinks, the way he sees the world. That's all Sarah. He hadn't meant to say her name, hadn't planned to bring her into this conversation. But there it was, hanging in the air between them like a ghost at the table. Vanessa didn't flinch, didn't change the subject or offer empty platitudes. She just nodded, her expression open and steady. "Marcus mentioned you'd lost your wife," she said quietly. "I can't imagine how hard that's been." 4 years last March. Daniel's voice came out rougher than he intended. "Cancer. It was fast. 6 months from diagnosis to—" He stopped, shook his head. "Sorry. This is exactly the kind of thing you're not supposed to talk about on a first date." "Says who?" "Every dating advice article on the internet." "Well, those are written by people who've probably never had a real conversation in their lives." Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "Daniel, I asked about Oliver because he's clearly the most important person in your world. I wouldn't want to know you without knowing about him, and that includes knowing about his mother." The sincerity in her voice undid something in him. Daniel set down his fork, no longer pretending to eat. "Most people treat it like it's contagious," he said. "Like if they acknowledge that my wife died, that I'm raising my son alone, it'll make things too complicated, too messy. Easier to just not ask." That must be incredibly lonely. It is. The admission surprised him. He'd never said it out loud before. "I have people who help. Mrs. Chen, my neighbor, she's like a grandmother to Oliver. Marcus. The other parents at school are friendly enough, but nobody really asks how we're doing. Not really. They ask if we're managing, if we need anything, but they don't ask about him. What he's thinking, what he's feeling, how he's processing everything." "What is he thinking?" Vanessa asked. "What does he feel about his mom?" And just like that, they were in deeper waters. The kind Daniel usually avoided because they hurt too much. But something about Vanessa's steady gaze, the way she listened with her whole body, made him want to answer honestly. "He doesn't remember her," Daniel said. "Not really. He was barely 1 when she died. Sometimes he says he remembers things, her singing, the way she smelled. But I think those are memories I've given him through stories, photos, videos." He paused, throat tight. "The worst part is that he knows he should have a mom. He sees other kids at school, at the playground, and he knows something's missing. He just doesn't know what exactly. And I don't know how to fill that space." Vanessa was quiet for a moment, her fingers laced together on the table. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle, the city lights blurring into watercolor washes of color. Do you talk to him about her? She asked. All the time. I've got pictures up around the house, her favorite books on his shelf. I tell him stories about how we met, things she loved, how excited she was when he was born. Daniel's voice wavered. But sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing, if keeping her memory alive is helping him or just confusing him. He'll ask questions like, why did she leave? Or when is she coming back? And I have to explain death to a 5-year-old, and nothing I say feels adequate. Because it's not, Vanessa said gently. There are no adequate words for that kind of loss, especially not for a child. No, there aren't. Daniel looked down at his hands, roughened by years of manual labor, still bearing faint scars from mistakes made when he was learning his trade. Hands that had held his wife in those final days, that now braided his son's hair for school pictures and packed lunches and signed permission slips. I keep thinking there will come a day when it gets easier, when the weight of being both parents gets lighter. But it doesn't. You just get stronger at carrying it. The vulnerability in his own words startled him. He'd never articulated it quite that way before. Never let anyone see this deeply into the mechanics of his grief and survival. But Vanessa didn't look uncomfortable. She looked understanding, like she was holding space for his pain without trying to fix it or minimize it. Can I tell you something? She asked. Daniel nodded. Before I started my company, I spent 2 years working with a nonprofit that supported children in foster care. Kids who'd lost parents to addiction, violence, neglect. Kids who were bouncing between homes, never staying anywhere long enough to feel safe. She paused, her eyes distant. I met hundreds of children during that time. And you know what I learned? What? That children are remarkably resilient, but their resilience doesn't come from forgetting or moving on. It comes from having at least one person who shows up, who stays, who loves them even when everything else is falling apart. Vanessa's gaze returned to his, clear and direct. Oliver is going to be okay, Daniel. Not because he has 2 parents or because his life is easy or uncomplicated. He's going to be okay because he has you, because you show up for him every single day, even when it hurts, even when you don't have all the answers. Something cracked open in Daniel's chest, a fissure in the armor he'd worn for so long he'd forgotten it was there. I don't feel like I'm enough, he whispered. Of course you don't. Love never feels like enough when you're the one giving it. But to Oliver, you're everything. Tears burned behind Daniel's eyes. He blinked them back, embarrassed, but one escaped anyway, tracking down his cheek before he could wipe it away. Sorry, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I don't normally. It's okay. Vanessa reached across the table, her hand hovering near his. Not touching, just offering. You don't have to apologize for feeling things. Daniel looked at her hand, then up at her face. This woman he'd met less than 2 hours ago, who had somehow managed to see past his defenses and into the raw, scared places he usually kept hidden. Who hadn't run. Who hadn't changed the subject. Who had simply listened and offered a truth that felt like oxygen. Slowly, carefully, he placed his hand over hers. Her fingers curled around his, warm and steady. They sat like that for a moment, connected across the table while the restaurant hummed around them and the rain whispered against the windows. Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Not attraction, exactly, though that was there too. Something deeper. Recognition. Like his soul had been wandering in the dark and had finally glimpsed a light. Thank you, he said. For what? For asking, for listening, for not making me feel broken. Vanessa squeezed his hand gently. You're not broken, Daniel, you're grieving. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Broken things can't grow. But grief can crack you open in ways that let new things take root, if you let them. The server approached, saw their clasped hands, and smoothly retreated. Daniel barely noticed. He was too focused on the woman across from him, this unexpected presence who had walked into his carefully controlled life and asked the questions no one else dared to ask. Can I ask you something now? He said. Of course. Why did you say yes to this? To dinner with a stranger Marcus told you about? Vanessa considered the question, her thumb tracing small circles on the back of his hand. Honestly, I'm tired of surface-level everything. Surface-level conversations, surface-level connections. I've dated men who were more interested in my company than in me, who saw my success as either threatening or transactional. She paused. Marcus said you were real, that you'd been through hell and came out still trying to be a good father, a good person. And I thought, that's someone I want to know. Someone who understands that life isn't always pretty or easy. Someone who's been broken open enough to let light in. I'm not sure how much light I'm letting in these days. More than you think. Her smile was soft, tinged with something that looked like hope. The fact that you're here, having this conversation, letting yourself be vulnerable, that's light, Daniel. That's you choosing to stay open even when it's terrifying. He wanted to argue, to list all the ways he'd closed himself off, all the defenses he'd built. But looking into Vanessa's eyes, he couldn't deny the truth of what she was saying. He was here. He was talking. He was holding her hand across a restaurant table and letting himself imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to not be alone. The server returned more cautiously this time, to clear their plates and offer dessert menus. They reluctantly released hands, though the warmth of contact lingered. I should probably get back soon, Daniel said, checking his watch. Mrs. Chen has been watching Oliver since 5, and she's got an early morning tomorrow. Of course, Vanessa signaled for the check. But before you go, can I ask one more thing? Sure. Would you want to do this again? Maybe something more casual next time. Coffee or a walk? I'd like to keep talking, if you would. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. The scared part of him wanted to retreat, to say this was nice, but maybe too complicated, maybe too soon. But a stronger part, the part that had felt alive for the first time in years during this conversation, refused to let fear win. I'd like that, he said. A lot, actually. Vanessa's smile could have lit the entire restaurant. Good. Then it's a plan. They split the check despite Vanessa's polite insistence that she could cover it, Daniel arguing that he wasn't so traditional that he couldn't handle paying for his own meal. They gathered their things, navigated back through the restaurant, and stepped out into a night that had turned crisp and clear, the rain having finally stopped. The city stretched out before them, wet streets reflecting streetlights and neon signs. Cars hissed past on damp pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Can I walk you to your car? Daniel offered. That would be nice? They fell into step together, shoulders nearly touching. Vanessa's car was parked in a nearby garage, a sleek sedan that probably cost more than Daniel made in 2 years. But she didn't make a show of it, just unlocked it with a quiet beep and turned to face him. Thank you for tonight, she said. For being honest, for trusting me with your story. Thank you for asking. Daniel hesitated, then added, I meant what I said earlier. I almost didn't come. I'm really glad I did. Me too. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Daniel wondered if he should hug her, shake her hand, just wave goodbye. Before he could decide, Vanessa stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a brief, warm embrace. She smelled like rain and something floral he couldn't name. Her head fit just beneath his chin. For 3 heartbeats, Daniel let himself sink into the contact, the simple human warmth of being held. When they pulled apart, Vanessa's eyes were bright. Text me when you get home safe? She asked. You too. She slipped into her car, started the engine, and pulled out of the garage with a final wave. Daniel watched her taillights disappear into Seattle traffic, then walked to his own truck with a lightness in his step he hadn't felt in years. The drive back to his neighborhood took 20 minutes through post-rain streets. Daniel's mind replayed the evening on loop, Vanessa's questions, her understanding, the way she'd looked at him like he was worth knowing despite all his jagged edges and unhealed wounds. He pulled into his driveway just after 9:30. The house was dark except for the porch light Mrs. Chen always left on. Daniel let himself in quietly, expecting to find her dozing in the armchair where she liked to knit while Oliver slept. Instead, she was wide awake, giving him a knowing smile. Well? She asked in her accented English. How was it? It was... Daniel searched for the right word. Good. Really good, actually. She is nice? Very nice. Mrs. Chen's smile widened. Good, good. You need nice. You deserve nice. She gathered her knitting into a bag and stood, patting his arm as she passed. Oliver was angel tonight. Brushed teeth, did homework, went to bed at 8:30. He wants you to wake him up when you get home, but I said no, let Papa rest. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, for everything. Is nothing. You know I love that boy like my own grandson. She paused at the door. Maybe next time you bring the nice lady to meet him, if it goes well. Daniel felt his chest tighten at the suggestion. Maybe. We'll see. After she left, he locked up and climbed the stairs to Oliver's room. The door was ajar, revealing his son curled beneath dinosaur-printed sheets, clutching the stuffed triceratops Sarah had bought him from the museum gift shop. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching Oliver's chest rise and fall in the steady rhythm of sleep. His son's face was peaceful, innocent, unmarked by the losses he'd already endured. So much of Sarah lived in that face. The curve of his jaw, the arch of his brows, the way his lips parted slightly as he dreamed. He's going to be okay, Vanessa had said, because he has you. Daniel wanted desperately to believe that, wanted to believe he was enough, that love could fill the gaps left by absence, that showing up every day, even broken, was what mattered most. He crossed to the bed, pressed a kiss to Oliver's forehead, and whispered, "I love you, buddy. More than anything." Oliver stirred but didn't wake, just burrowed deeper into his pillow. Daniel returned downstairs, poured himself a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table where so many of his nights ended, alone with his thoughts and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. But tonight felt different. Tonight the silence didn't feel quite so heavy. His phone buzzed, a text from Vanessa. "Home safe. Thank you again for tonight. Sleep well, Daniel." He typed back, "You too. Talk soon?" Her response came immediately. "Definitely." Daniel set his phone down, a smile tugging at his lips. He didn't know what this was or where it might lead. Didn't know if he was ready for something new or if he'd ever truly be ready. But for the first time in 4 years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry everything alone. Maybe there was room in his life for more than survival. Maybe there was room for hope. The kitchen clock ticked toward 10. Daniel finished his water, turned off the lights, and climbed the stairs to his own room. As he passed Oliver's door again, he heard his son's sleepy voice. "Papa?" Daniel backtracked, poking his head into the room. "Hey, buddy, I thought you were asleep." "I was. I woke up." Oliver rubbed his eyes, sitting up slightly. "Did you have dinner?" "I did." "Was it good?" "Very good." "Did you eat vegetables?" Daniel smiled. Oliver had recently become obsessed with healthy eating after a school presentation about nutrition. "Yes, I ate vegetables." "Good." Oliver yawned, already settling back down. "Mrs. Chen said you went to meet a friend." Daniel's breath caught. "Yeah, I did." "Are they nice?" "Very nice." "Okay." Oliver's eyes were already closing again. "Love you, Papa." "Love you too, Oliver, so much." By the time Daniel reached the doorway, his son was asleep again, one small hand still clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Daniel stood there for a long moment, his heart full of a complicated mixture of grief and gratitude, fear and fragile hope. Then he went to his own room, changed into pajamas, and climbed into bed. The sheets were cool, the mattress too big for one person. But tonight, instead of lying awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past he couldn't change, Daniel let his mind drift to the evening he'd just had, to Vanessa's questions and her kindness, to the way she'd listened without judgment, to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over. He fell asleep with his phone on the nightstand, Vanessa's last text still glowing on the screen, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, his dreams weren't haunted by loss. They were filled with light. The following Saturday arrived with the kind of autumn sunshine that made Seattle feel like a different city entirely. Daniel woke to Oliver jumping on his bed, all elbows and knees and breathless excitement. "Papa, Papa, wake up! Mrs. Chen says we can go to the park today if you're not too tired." Daniel groaned, squinting against the light streaming through his bedroom window. "What time is it? 7:30? That's basically afternoon." "That's basically still morning, buddy." But Daniel was already sitting up, ruffling Oliver's hair. His son's enthusiasm was infectious, impossible to resist. Okay, park it is. But you need to eat breakfast first. Real breakfast, not just cereal." "Pancakes?" "If you want pancakes, you're helping me make them." Oliver's face lit up. Can we make dinosaur shapes? Would you accept any other shape? They tumbled downstairs together, Oliver chattering about a documentary he'd watched about velociraptors while Daniel pulled out the pancake mix and began measuring ingredients. This was their Saturday routine, had been for years now. Slow mornings, unhurried breakfasts, time that belonged only to them. Oliver climbed onto a step stool beside the stove, watching intently as Daniel heated the griddle. Can I pour? Carefully. Daniel guided his son's small hands as they drizzled batter into vaguely dinosaur-shaped puddles. Some looked more like abstract blobs than prehistoric creatures, but Oliver was delighted with each one, narrating their species and temperament as they cooked. That one's a stegosaurus. He's friendly, but he gets nervous around loud noises. And that one's a T-Rex, obviously, and he's really hungry because he hasn't eaten in 3 days. Daniel flipped the pancakes, smiling despite the exhaustion that still clung to him. He hadn't slept as well as that first night after dinner with Vanessa. The hope that had felt so bright in the moment had been gradually worn down by the reality of single parenthood, the endless tasks, the constant vigilance, the weight of being everything to someone so small and dependent. But this morning, with Oliver beside him creating dinosaur pancakes and inventing elaborate backstories, the weight felt manageable, almost light. His phone buzzed on the counter. Daniel glanced at it, saw Vanessa's name, and felt his pulse quicken. Good morning. How's your Saturday starting? Oliver noticed him looking at the phone. Who's that? Just a friend. Daniel typed back quickly. Making dinosaur pancakes. You? The friend from dinner? Daniel paused, spatula in hand. Yeah, her name's Vanessa. Is she nice? Very nice. Oliver considered this while Daniel plated the pancakes and drizzled them with syrup. They sat at the kitchen table, Oliver's legs swinging beneath his chair, too short to reach the floor. Does she like dinosaurs? Oliver asked through a mouthful of stegosaurus. I don't know. I didn't ask. You should ask. It's important. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Dinosaur pancakes sound significantly better than my yogurt and coffee. Can I ask you something? He typed. Sure. Would you want to get coffee sometime this week? Nothing fancy, just a chance to talk more. Daniel's thumb hovered over the keyboard. Oliver was watching him with the uncanny perception children sometimes had, like he could sense when something important was happening, even if he didn't understand what. Papa, you're smiling at your phone. Am I? Yeah, like you do when I show you my drawings. Daniel looked at his son. The small person who knew him better than anyone, who could read his moods and emotions with an accuracy that sometimes unsettled him. There was no hiding from Oliver, no pretending that Vanessa was just some casual acquaintance. Vanessa asked if I want to get coffee with her, Daniel said carefully. Do you? I think so. Would that be okay? Oliver shrugged, focusing intently on cutting his pancake into precise bites. I guess. As long as you're home for dinner. Mrs. Chen makes really good dinner, but yours is better. Something in Daniel's chest tightened. I'll always be home for dinner, buddy. I promise. Okay. Oliver looked up, syrup on his chin. Can we go to the park now? Daniel wiped his son's face with a napkin, then texted Vanessa back. Coffee sounds great. When works for you? Her response came as they were clearing dishes. Tuesday afternoon, there's a place near Pike Place Market. Cascade Coffee. Know it? I'll find it. What time? 3? Perfect. See you then. Daniel pocketed his phone and turned to find Oliver already at the front door, shoes on the wrong feet, jacket half zipped, vibrating with impatience. Now, can we go? Let me fix your shoes first. They spent the morning at the neighborhood park, Oliver racing between the playground equipment with the boundless energy of childhood while Daniel sat on a bench, watching. Other parents dotted the park, mostly mothers, a few fathers, all of them managing the careful choreography of supervision and freedom that parenting required. Daniel recognized some faces, exchanged nods and brief pleasantries. But he rarely engaged beyond that. The other parents had their own groups, their own rhythms. The mothers especially seemed to exist in a world he couldn't quite access, sharing knowing looks and quick conversations while their children played. He'd felt like an outsider since Sarah died. The single dad. The widower. The one people didn't quite know how to talk to. But sitting there in the autumn sunshine, watching Oliver conquer the monkey bars with fierce determination, Daniel felt something shift. The conversation with Vanessa had cracked something open in him, created space for possibilities he'd shut down long ago. Maybe he didn't have to be just the grieving widower anymore. Maybe he could be someone who had loved and lost but was still capable of loving again. The thought terrified him. Oliver ran over, breathless and flushed. "Papa, did you see? I made it all the way across without falling." "I saw. That was amazing, buddy. Can you push me on the swings now?" They moved to the swing set, Daniel standing behind the rubber seat while Oliver climbed on, gripping the chains with both hands. Daniel pushed gently at first, then higher as Oliver shrieked with delight. "Higher, Papa, higher!" "Any higher and you'll fly away. That's the point!" Daniel laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he'd laughed like this? Really laughed, from somewhere deep in his chest? They stayed at the park until Oliver's energy finally flagged, until hunger and the approaching afternoon drove them home. Mrs. Chen met them at the door with that knowing smile she'd worn all week. "You have good morning?" "The best," Oliver announced, already kicking off his shoes. "I did the monkey bars by myself." "Very impressive. You are getting so strong." Mrs. Chen turned to Daniel. "And you? You look different today." "Different how?" "Lighter." She patted his arm. "Is good. You should be light sometimes." After lunch, Oliver settled in front of the TV with one of his dinosaur documentaries, while Daniel tackled the mountain of laundry that had accumulated during the week. Folding tiny socks and organizing Oliver's shirts by color, he thought about Tuesday, about seeing Vanessa again. The anticipation was unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. He'd grown so accustomed to the flat line of his emotional life, the steady rhythm of work and parenting and survival, that the spike of excitement felt dangerous, like he was setting himself up for disappointment. His phone rang. "Marcus." "So?" his friend demanded without preamble. "How did it go? You never called me back." "It went well." "That's it? That's all I get? It went well?" Daniel tucked the phone against his shoulder, continuing to fold laundry. "What do you want? A detailed play-by-play?" "Yes, actually. I set you up. I deserve details. We had dinner, we talked, it was nice. Nice. Daniel, I've seen Vanessa. She's gorgeous, successful, and actually interested in you, and all you can say is nice?" Daniel sighed. "Okay, it was more than nice. She's really easy to talk to. Smart. Kind." She asked about Oliver and actually wanted to hear the answer. "And? And we're getting coffee on Tuesday." He could practically hear Marcus grinning through the phone. "Now we're getting somewhere." "Where?" "Someplace called Cascade Coffee near Pike Place." "Good choice. Casual, but not too casual. Low pressure." Marcus paused. "You nervous?" "Terrified." "Good. That means you care. You haven't cared about anything but Oliver in 4 years. This is progress." Daniel set down the shirt he was folding. "What if I'm not ready? What if I'm making a mistake?" "Then you're making a mistake. But at least you're trying. At least you're not just going through the motions anymore." Marcus's voice softened. "Sarah wouldn't want you to be alone forever, man. You know that." "I know." Daniel's throat tightened. "But knowing and feeling are different things." "Yeah, they are. But maybe it's time to start letting yourself feel again, even if it's scary." They talked for a few more minutes before Oliver appeared in the doorway, documentary finished, demanding attention. Daniel hung up and spent the rest of the afternoon playing dinosaurs, reading books, helping Oliver build an elaborate fortress out of couch cushions. By the time bedtime rolled around, Daniel was exhausted in that good way that came from a day well spent. He tucked Oliver in, read 2 chapters of their current book, and listened to his son's rambling thoughts about velociraptors and friendship and whether robots would ever be able to time travel. "Papa?" Oliver's voice was sleepy now, his eyes half closed. "Yeah, buddy." "I'm glad you have a friend." Daniel's breath caught. "Yeah?" "Yeah. You're always taking care of me. You should have someone to talk to, too." The wisdom in those words, coming from someone so small, nearly broke Daniel open. He kissed Oliver's forehead, smoothed his hair back. "I love you so much, Oliver. You know that, right?" "I know. Love you too." Oliver yawned hugely. Even more than dinosaurs. Wow, that's a lot. The most. Daniel stayed until Oliver's breathing deepened into sleep, then retreated to his own room. He sat on the edge of his bed, pulled out his phone, and opened the text thread with Vanessa. Before he could overthink it, he typed, "Oliver says it's important that you like dinosaurs, so I'm asking, do you like dinosaurs?" Her response came quickly. "I have a healthy respect for any creature that dominated the Earth for 165 million years. Does that count?" Daniel smiled. "He'll accept that." "Good. I was worried I'd fail the entrance exam. There are more tests. He takes this very seriously. I would expect nothing less. Should I be studying? Probably. He's particularly passionate about the Cretaceous period right now." "Noted. I'll brush up on my prehistoric knowledge before Tuesday." Daniel set his phone down, that unfamiliar lightness returning to his chest. Vanessa was making an effort, not just with him, but with the idea of Oliver, with the reality of what dating a single father meant. Most people would have made a joke and moved on, but she was engaging, showing genuine interest. It mattered, more than he wanted to admit. Tuesday arrived faster than Daniel expected. He arranged to leave the shop early, leaving his assistant, Jake, to close up. Jake, a 24-year-old with more tattoos than social graces but a gift for engine work, just grinned knowingly. "Hot date?" "Coffee, with a friend." "Sure, boss, whatever you say." Jake wiped his hands on a rag. "You want me to do the quarterly inventory while you're gone, being all mysterious?" "That would be great, actually." Yeah. Just remember this when it's time to talk about my raise." Daniel changed out of his work clothes in the shop's small bathroom, scrubbing engine grease from under his fingernails and trying to make his hair look intentional rather than haphazard. His reflection showed a man who looked tired but hopeful, worn but not defeated. Good enough. The drive to Pike Place took 30 minutes through afternoon traffic. Daniel found parking 3 blocks away and walked through the busy market district, dodging tourists and street performers and vendors calling out about fresh fish and local honey. Cascade Coffee was tucked between a used bookstore and a shop selling handmade jewelry, small, cozy, with mismatched furniture and art from local artists covering the walls. Exactly the kind of place Daniel would have chosen if left to his own devices. Vanessa was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of her. She looked different in casual clothes, jeans and a soft green sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Less polished than at the restaurant, but somehow more real. She saw him and smiled, that same warm expression that had disarmed him the first time. "I took a guess on your order," she said as he approached. "Black coffee, no sugar. Was I close?" "Exactly right. How did you know?" "You strike me as someone who doesn't complicate things unnecessarily." Vanessa gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit. Tell me about your week." Daniel settled into the chair, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "Busy. Had a transmission rebuild that fought me the whole way. Oliver lost his favorite dinosaur book at school and had a meltdown that lasted an hour. The usual chaos." "Did you find the book?" "Eventually, it was in the nurse's office. He'd brought it to show his teacher and left it there." Daniel shook his head. "The crisis management skills required for parenting a 5-year-old are intense." Vanessa laughed. "I can imagine. Did he recover?" "Once the book was back in his possession, it was like it never happened. That's the thing about kids. They feel everything so intensely, but they also move on so quickly. That's a gift, I think. Adults could learn from that." "Maybe." Daniel sipped his coffee. It was good, strong and hot, exactly what he needed. "What about you? How was your week?" "Meetings. So many meetings. We're launching a new product next month, and everyone has opinions about everything." Vanessa rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Sometimes I miss the early days when it was just me and 2 other people making decisions in my basement." "You must be good at what you do, to have grown it this much." "I'm good at surrounding myself with people smarter than me and then getting out of their way." She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "But honestly, running a company can be really lonely. Everyone thinks you have all the answers, that you're always confident and certain. But most of the time, I'm just making educated guesses and hoping I don't screw up too badly." The admission surprised Daniel. "You hide it well. At the restaurant, you seemed so together." "That's years of practice. Fake it till you make it, right?" Vanessa's smile turned self-deprecating. "But the truth is, I'm not that different from anyone else. I have insecurities and doubts and days where I wonder if I'm enough. You too, huh? Me too. They shared a moment of understanding, a recognition of the masks everyone wore and the vulnerability beneath. Outside the window, the market bustled with afternoon energy. People buying flowers, sampling cheese, arguing cheerfully over the price of salmon. "Can I ask you something?" Vanessa said. "Always seems to lead somewhere interesting when you do." "What made you say yes to coffee today?" "Really?" Daniel thought about that. About the fear that had almost kept him away, the hope that had pushed him forward anyway. Oliver said something over the weekend. He said he was glad I had a friend, that I was always taking care of him, so I should have someone to talk to. Vanessa's expression softened. He sounds like a wise kid. Too wise sometimes. It's like he knows things he shouldn't have to know. Daniel's voice dropped. After Sarah died, he became so attuned to my moods. If I was sad, he'd try to cheer me up. If I was stressed, he'd be extra good, like he thought it would help. And I hate that he learned to do that. I hate that my grief made him feel responsible for my happiness. That's not your fault, Daniel. Isn't it? I'm supposed to be taking care of him, not the other way around. You are taking care of him, but he loves you, and love makes us want to help the people we care about, even when we're 5. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. My guess is that Oliver isn't trying to take care of you because he thinks you can't handle it. He's doing it because he sees you handling everything, and he wants to help carry the weight. That's different. Daniel hadn't thought of it that way. The reframe shifted something in his perspective, made Oliver's behavior feel less like a failure on Daniel's part, and more like an expression of love. You're good at this, he said quietly. At what? Seeing things differently, helping people step outside their own heads. I've had a lot of therapy. Vanessa said it without embarrassment, matter of fact. After I started the company and realized I had no idea how to handle the pressure, I found a therapist who helped me work through a lot of my own stuff. Best investment I ever made. What kind of stuff? She considered the question, her gaze distant. Control issues mostly, perfectionism. The belief that I had to do everything myself or it wouldn't get done right. Growing up, I was the oldest of 4 kids. My parents worked multiple jobs, so I basically raised my siblings. I got really good at managing everything, at being the responsible one. But I also learned that asking for help was a weakness. And therapy changed that? Slowly. I'm still working on it, honestly. But I'm better at delegating now, better at trusting other people, better at recognizing when I'm trying to control things I can't control. She met his eyes. Like relationships. You can't force them to go a certain way. You just have to show up and see what happens. Daniel nodded slowly. I'm not good at that. The not knowing. The uncertainty. Nobody is. But I think maybe that's where the good stuff lives. In the spaces between what we can control and what we can't. They talked for over an hour, their coffee growing cold as conversation flowed easily from topic to topic. Vanessa told him about her siblings, 2 sisters and a brother, all scattered across the country now, but still close. Daniel talked about his parents, retired in Arizona, who visited twice a year and called weekly to check on Oliver. They wanted me to move down there after Sarah died, Daniel admitted, so they could help with Oliver, and part of me wanted to. It would have been easier having that support, but Seattle is home. Sarah's buried here. All our memories are here. Moving felt like erasing her. Do you ever regret staying? Sometimes. When it's 3 in the morning and Oliver's sick and I'm exhausted and scared and wishing there was someone else to share the burden. Daniel stared into his empty cup. But then other times I'm glad we stayed. Glad Oliver gets to grow up in the house where his mom lived, in the city she loved. It feels like keeping her close. Vanessa reached across the table, her hand covering his. You're doing an incredible job, Daniel. I hope you know that. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's parenthood from what I understand. Nobody feels like they're doing it right. Do you want kids? The question slipped out before Daniel could stop it. Sorry, that's probably too personal. No, it's okay. Vanessa withdrew her hand, but her expression remained open. Honestly? I don't know. I used to think I did. Then I got so focused on building the company that it fell off my radar. Now I'm 30 and all my friends are getting married and having babies, and I'm wondering if I missed some critical window. She paused. But I also don't want to have kids just because I'm supposed to. If it happens, I want it to be intentional. Wanted. That's smart. Is it? Or is it just fear dressed up as rationality? Daniel smiled despite himself. Maybe both. Most smart decisions probably are. The coffee shop had filled around them, the afternoon crowd settling in with laptops and books. A barista wiped down tables, her movements efficient and practiced. Outside, the light had shifted, golden and slanting, signaling the approach of evening. I should probably get going, Daniel said reluctantly. I promised Oliver I'd be home for dinner. Of course. Vanessa stood, gathering her coat. Can I walk you to your truck? They left the coffee shop together, stepping back into the market's controlled chaos. Daniel led the way through the crowd, very aware of Vanessa walking beside him, their shoulders occasionally brushing. When they reached his truck, Vanessa turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. I really enjoyed this, she said. Talking to you feels easy, like I don't have to perform or pretend. I feel the same way. So maybe we could do it again? Keep talking? Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. This was the moment, the choice between retreating into safety or stepping forward into unknown territory. He thought about Oliver saying he was glad Daniel had a friend, about the lightness he'd felt all week, about the way Vanessa listened without judgment, asked questions that mattered, saw him as more than just a grieving widower. I'd like that, he said. A lot. Vanessa's smile could have powered the whole city. Good. Then let's make a plan. Are you free this weekend? I have Oliver on Saturday, but Sunday afternoon he'll be at a birthday party. I'd have a few hours. Perfect. There's this gallery opening in Capitol Hill. Modern art, wine, probably pretentious, but potentially interesting. Want to check it out with me? A gallery opening. The kind of event Daniel would never attend on his own, that existed in a world so far from his daily reality, it might as well be on another planet. Everything in him wanted to make an excuse, to suggest something safer, more familiar. But Vanessa was watching him with those steady eyes, offering not just an invitation, but a bridge into a different kind of life. One where he could be more than just Oliver's father, more than just a mechanic covered in grease and grief. Okay, he heard himself say. Yeah, let's do it. Really? Vanessa looked genuinely delighted. You're not just saying that to be polite? I'm terrified, but I'm saying yes anyway. That's all I can ask. She stepped closer, rose on her toes, and kissed his cheek. Brief, warm, leaving the scent of her perfume in the air between them. Text me later? Let me know you got home safe? I will. Daniel climbed into his truck, started the engine, and watched Vanessa walk back toward the market, her figure gradually swallowed by the crowd. His cheeks still tingled where her lips had touched. The drive home passed in a blur. His mind kept circling back to their conversation, to the easy comfort of her presence, to the terrifying possibility that maybe he could have this. Maybe he could let someone new into the carefully constructed world he'd built for himself and Oliver. Mrs. Chen met him at the door with Oliver bouncing beside her, already talking before Daniel had his shoes off. Papa, I made you a drawing. It's a T-Rex eating a pizza because I decided that even dinosaurs like pizza sometimes. Daniel accepted the crayon masterpiece with appropriate reverence. This is amazing, buddy. We'll put it on the fridge. After Mrs. Chen left, Daniel and Oliver made dinner together. Spaghetti with marinara sauce, garlic bread, a side of steamed broccoli that Oliver regarded with deep suspicion but eventually ate under duress. How was coffee with your friend? Oliver asked around a mouthful of pasta. It was good. We talked a lot. About what? All kinds of things. She told me about her family. I told her about you. Oliver perked up. What did you say about me? That you're the smartest, funniest, most dinosaur-obsessed kid I know. Did you tell her I can do the monkey bars now? I forgot to mention that. I'll tell her next time. When's next time? Daniel hesitated. Sunday. We're going to an art gallery. What's a gallery? A place where people show paintings and sculptures. Art. Oliver considered this. Can I come? The question landed like a punch to Daniel's chest. Not this time, buddy. You'll be at Tommy's birthday party, remember? Oh yeah. Oliver twirled spaghetti around his fork. Is Vanessa your girlfriend? No, we're just friends. But you like her. It wasn't a question. Daniel looked at his son, this small human who saw everything, who understood more than a 5-year-old should have to understand. Yeah, he admitted. I like her. Okay. Oliver returned his attention to his pasta, apparently satisfied with the answer. They finished dinner, cleaned up together, and settled on the couch for their evening routine. One episode of Oliver's current favorite show, then bath time, then books before bed. As Daniel read aloud from their chapter book, his voice falling into the familiar rhythm of the story, he felt something he'd thought was gone forever. Not happiness exactly, but something close to it. A sense that maybe the future held more than just endless repetition of the same difficult days. Maybe there was room for something new. Something like hope. Sunday afternoon found Daniel standing in front of his closet, staring at a collection of flannel shirts and work jeans that suddenly felt entirely inadequate for a gallery opening. Oliver sat cross-legged on the bed behind him, offering commentary. What about the blue one? It has a stain on the sleeve. The gray one? Too casual. Papa, they're all casual. You're a mechanic, not a businessman. Daniel turned to look at his son, both amused and slightly wounded by the brutal honesty. Thanks for the reminder, buddy. I'm just saying, Oliver shrugged. Vanessa already knows what you do. She's not going to care what shirt you wear. The kid had a point. Still, Daniel wanted to make an effort. He settled on dark jeans without holes and a button-down shirt Sarah had bought him years ago for a wedding they'd attended. It still fit, if a bit snug across the shoulders from the physical labor of his work. Marcus arrived to take Oliver to the birthday party, his eyes widening theatrically when he saw Daniel. Well, look at you all dressed up. This is serious. It's just a gallery opening, with Vanessa Hale, who, may I remind you, could date literally anyone and chose to spend her Sunday afternoon with you. Marcus grinned. That's not just anything, my friend. Oliver tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Can we go now? The party started 5 minutes ago, and I don't want to miss the bounce house. Patience, little man. Your dad needs some final words of wisdom from his best friend. No, I really don't. Be yourself, Marcus said, ignoring Daniel's protest. Don't overthink it. And for the love of everything, if she wants to hold your hand or kiss you or anything, let her. Stop being so afraid of being happy. Daniel felt heat creep up his neck. Oliver standing right there. Oliver knows what kissing is, don't you, buddy? Ew, gross. Oliver made a face. Can we please go now? After they left, the house fell into silence. Daniel checked his reflection one more time, attempted to tame his hair with water, gave up, and headed out. The gallery was in Capitol Hill, about 20 minutes away in Sunday traffic. He found parking 2 blocks over and walked through streets lined with vintage shops and coffee houses and restaurants that catered to the neighborhood's eclectic mix of artists, students, and young professionals. The gallery itself was a converted warehouse space with massive windows and white walls that seemed to glow in the afternoon light. People clustered near the entrance, holding wine glasses and speaking in the hushed tones reserved for art appreciation. Daniel felt immediately out of place, like he'd wandered into someone else's world by mistake. Then he saw Vanessa. She stood near one of the large paintings, studying it with her head tilted, wearing a deep blue dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot, and she held a glass of white wine in one hand. Daniel's breath caught. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache, and for a moment he couldn't understand why she'd want anything to do with him. He was just a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a life full of complicated grief. What could he possibly offer someone like her? She turned and saw him, and her face lit up with genuine pleasure. That smile dissolved every doubt. "Daniel, you made it!" She crossed to him quickly, reaching for his hand. "I was starting to worry you'd gotten lost." Almost did. Parking in this neighborhood is a nightmare. Worth it though, right? She gestured to the gallery around them. The artist is someone I went to college with. She's incredibly talented. Daniel looked at the nearest painting, an abstract explosion of color and texture that might have been a landscape or a fever dream, or both. He had no idea what to say about it. "It's interesting," Vanessa laughed, the sound low and warm. "That's the most diplomatic response I've ever heard. You hate it." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Your face says everything." She squeezed his hand. "Come on, let me get you some wine and introduce you to Sarah, the artist. You can tell her exactly what you think." "That seems like a terrible idea." "It's the best idea. She appreciates honesty." Vanessa led him through the gallery, stopping to grab him a glass of red wine from a server circulating with a tray. Daniel took it gratefully, needing something to do with his free hand. They navigated around clusters of people discussing composition and color theory and the artist's evolution since her last show. Sarah Chen, no relation to his neighbor Mrs. Chen, though Daniel made a mental note of the coincidence, turned out to be a small woman with paint-stained fingers and an infectious energy. When Vanessa introduced Daniel as a friend who's very honest about art, Sarah's eyes gleamed with interest. "Oh, good. I'm so tired of people telling me they love everything. What do you actually think?" She gestured to the painting they stood before. A massive canvas dominated by sharp angles in varying shades of gray and black. Daniel studied it, trying to find something genuine to say. "It makes me feel unsettled, like something's about to happen but hasn't yet." Sarah's expression shifted to surprise, then delight. "Yes, exactly. It's called Before the Storm. You got it immediately." "Beginner's luck," Daniel said, but Sarah was already pulling him toward another piece, explaining her process and intention with the kind of passion that reminded him of Oliver talking about dinosaurs. Vanessa drifted alongside them, her hand still loosely holding his, occasionally adding observations or asking questions. Daniel found himself relaxing into the experience, discovering that art wasn't as intimidating when someone explained it without pretension. Sarah spoke about painting the way he spoke about engines, as something to be understood through patience and attention, something that revealed itself slowly to those willing to look. After touring the entire gallery, Sarah was pulled away by other guests, leaving Daniel and Vanessa standing near the windows overlooking the street. "Thank you," Vanessa said softly. "For what?" "For being open to this. I know it's not your usual scene." "It's not," Daniel admitted, "but I'm glad I came. Sarah's great. Her work is actually really interesting once you understand what she's trying to do." "That's true of most things, I think. Once you understand the intention behind something, it becomes easier to appreciate." Vanessa turned to face him fully. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "I've been on a lot of dates, probably more than I care to admit, and most of them followed the same pattern. Nice dinner, polite conversation, both people performing their best versions of themselves. Very surface level, very safe." She paused, her gaze steady on his. "But with you, it feels different. Like we're actually getting to know each other. Like we're not afraid to show the messy, complicated parts." Daniel's heart hammered. "Is that a good thing?" "The best thing." She hesitated, then added, "I know this is still new, and I know you're dealing with a lot, but I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm not scared off by your grief or by Oliver or by any of it. If anything, it makes me respect you more." The words landed like a gift he hadn't known he needed. Daniel set his wine glass on a nearby table and took both of Vanessa's hands in his. "I'm terrified," he said quietly. "Of this. Of letting someone in again. Of what it means for Oliver. Of getting hurt or hurting you. I'm basically just walking around in a constant state of low-grade panic." "I know. And you're still here?" "I'm still here," Vanessa smiled. "Because despite the fear, there's something else too, isn't there? Something that feels worth the risk?" Daniel nodded, unable to speak around the tightness in his throat. Because she was right. Beneath the fear was something else. A pull toward this woman who saw him clearly and didn't look away, who asked hard questions and sat with difficult answers, who made him feel like maybe he could be more than just a father in survival mode. "Can I ask you something now?" he said. "Of course. What did you mean when you said running your company is lonely? You're surrounded by people all the time." Vanessa's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her features. "Being surrounded by people isn't the same as being known by them. At work, I'm always performing a role, the decisive CEO, the confident leader. Everyone comes to me with problems they need solved or decisions they need made, but nobody asks how I'm doing, what keeps me up at night, if I'm scared or uncertain or struggling." "What does keep you up at night?" She looked surprised by the question, like no one had ever asked before. "Honestly, the fear that I'm not enough, that I'll make a decision that destroys everything we've built, that I'm letting people down without even realizing it." She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "I have 300 employees who depend on me for their livelihoods. That's 300 families whose lives could be upended if I fail. The weight of that is crushing, Daniel finished. Yeah, I know that feeling. Different circumstances, same weight. You do, don't you? It wasn't a question. Vanessa studied him with those perceptive eyes. That's why this works. We both understand what it means to carry something heavy alone. They stood together in the middle of the gallery, surrounded by abstract art and the murmur of sophisticated conversation, two people who had found each other across the gap of their separate loneliness. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, a settling into place that he hadn't expected. Do you want to get out of here? Vanessa asked. Walk around the neighborhood for a bit? Yes, definitely yes. They said goodbye to Sarah, who hugged them both and made Vanessa promise to visit her studio soon. Outside, the afternoon had turned cool and bright, the kind of October day that made Seattle feel like the most beautiful city in the world. They walked without destination, hands linked, weaving through the Sunday crowds. Tell me more about Oliver, Vanessa said as they passed a used bookstore. What's he like when he's not talking about dinosaurs? Daniel smiled. He's funny, really funny, in this deadpan way that catches me off guard. Last week, we were at the grocery store and this woman was blocking the entire aisle with her cart while she talked on her phone. Oliver looks at her, looks at me, and says very seriously, Papa, I think she's lost. Should we help her find her way? Loud enough that she definitely heard. Vanessa laughed. What did you do? Apologized and moved to a different aisle, but I was dying inside. He's 5 and already has better comedic timing than I do. He sounds like he has Sarah's sense of humor, your wife's, I mean. Daniel felt the familiar clench in his chest at her name, but it was softer than usual. Yeah, she was really funny too, sarcastic. She could take any situation and find the absurdity in it. He paused. Oliver has her laugh, this surprised, delighted sound that makes everyone around him smile. Sometimes I hear it and forget for a second that she's gone, like she's just in the other room. Does that bother you, the forgetting? No, it's actually nice, like she's still here in some way, living on through him. They turned down a quieter street lined with Victorian houses converted into apartments. A cat watched them from a front porch, tail flicking lazily. Can I ask about her? Vanessa's voice was gentle. About what happened? Daniel had been waiting for this question, knowing it would come eventually. Most people danced around it or asked in that hushed, careful way that made grief feel like something shameful. But Vanessa asked directly, with the same straightforward honesty she brought to everything else. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when Oliver was 6 months old, Daniel said. By the time they found it, it had already spread. They gave her maybe a year with treatment. She made it 6 months. I'm so sorry. Everyone says that, and I know they mean it, but he struggled to find the words. Sorry doesn't really capture it, the way it felt to watch her disappear piece by piece. The way the doctors kept using words like aggressive and terminal, like they were talking about weather patterns instead of my wife dying. Vanessa didn't offer platitudes. She just listened, her hand steady in his. The worst part was that she knew she was leaving Oliver, Daniel continued. That killed her more than the cancer did. She'd lie in the hospital bed and cry about missing his first day of school, his first bike ride, his graduation, all these milestones she'd never see. And I'd try to comfort her, but what could I say? She was right. She was going to miss everything. What did you say? That I'd tell him about her. That I'd make sure he knew how much she loved him, how excited she was to be his mother, even for the short time she had. Daniel's voice cracked. I promised her he'd know her through me, through stories and photos and all the little pieces of her we'd keep alive. That's a beautiful promise. It's also terrifying, because what if I get it wrong? What if I tell the stories badly, or forget important things, or can't answer his questions? What if I fail her? They had reached a small park, just a pocket of green with a few benches and a water fountain. Vanessa guided them to a bench and they sat, still holding hands. Daniel, look at me. When he met her eyes, she continued, You're not going to get it wrong. You're already keeping that promise every day, just by loving Oliver the way you do. By being present and honest and making pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. That's how you honor her memory. Is it enough? Yes. She said it with such certainty that Daniel almost believed her. And I know this because I've seen it. Remember I told you about working with foster kids? Yeah. There was this one boy, maybe 7 years old. His mother had died of an overdose, and he'd been shuffled between relatives who didn't really want him. He was angry, withdrawn, barely spoke. But then he went to live with this single dad who'd lost his wife to cancer. And this man, he talked about his wife all the time. Showed the boy photos, told stories, kept her present in their lives. And slowly the boy started to open up, started to believe that maybe love didn't always end in abandonment. Vanessa's thumb traced circles on Daniel's palm. What that man gave the boy wasn't a replacement for what he'd lost. It was proof that people could carry grief and still choose love. Still show up. Still create something good from the broken pieces. You're doing the same thing for Oliver. Daniel felt tears burning behind his eyes. I don't feel like I'm doing anything good. I feel like I'm barely keeping it together most days. That's because you're in it. You can't see what I see from the outside, that you're raising a bright, funny, kind kid who feels secure enough to have opinions about dinosaurs and worry about whether your friend likes pancakes. You've created that security, Daniel. You've built a life for him where he feels safe enough to be a kid. He still asks about her sometimes. When she's coming back. What do you tell him? The truth. That she loved him very much, but she got sick and her body stopped working. That she's not coming back, but she'd want him to be happy and have a good life. Daniel wiped at his eyes with his free hand. He asked me last month if he could have a new mom. Just like that, out of nowhere. Papa, can I have a new mom? Tommy at school has 2 moms and I don't have any. What did you say? That maybe someday, if we met someone really special who wanted to be part of our family, but that nobody could replace his mom. They'd just be someone new who loved him too. Daniel looked at Vanessa. Is that crazy, telling a 5-year-old about hypothetical stepmothers? No, it's honest. And it shows him that your family can grow without erasing his mom's place in it. They sat in silence for a moment, watching leaves drift down from the trees surrounding the park. An older couple walked past with a small dog, nodding in greeting. The world continued its normal rhythm, while Daniel felt something fundamental shifting inside him. I haven't talked about her like this in a long time, he said quietly. Most people get uncomfortable when I bring her up, like talking about the dead wife is a mood killer. Well, I'm not most people. No, you're really not. Daniel turned to face her more fully. Can I ask you something kind of heavy? After everything we've already discussed? Of course. Why are you single? I mean, you're smart, successful, beautiful, emotionally available. Why isn't there a line of people trying to date you? Vanessa smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. There was someone, about 2 years ago. We were together for almost a year. What happened? He proposed. I said no. We broke up. Daniel waited, sensing there was more to the story. I cared about him, Vanessa continued, but I didn't love him. Not the way you're supposed to love someone you're planning to spend your life with. And when he proposed, I realized I'd been going through the motions, trying to make it work because it seemed like the right time, the right type of person. He was stable, kind, successful, everything I thought I wanted. But there was no spark, no depth. We had nice conversations about nice things, and it was all very pleasant and safe and completely hollow. She looked down at their joined hands. After we broke up, I spent 6 months just being alone. Dating myself, I guess. Figuring out what I actually wanted instead of what I thought I should want. What did you figure out? That I'd rather be alone than settle for surface-level connection. That I wanted someone real, even if that meant being vulnerable and messy and scared. She met his eyes. Someone like you. Daniel's breath caught. Vanessa, I'm not saying this to pressure you or push for something you're not ready for. I just want you to know that I see you, Daniel, the real you, grief and fear and all, and I'm choosing to be here anyway, because what we have, these conversations, this honesty, that's what I've been looking for. He should have been terrified. This was too much, too fast, too real. But instead, Daniel felt something like relief, because hiding was exhausting, pretending to be okay when he wasn't, protecting everyone from his pain, keeping his heart locked away where it couldn't be hurt again. It was all so exhausting. And here was Vanessa, offering him permission to stop hiding, to be messy and complicated and broken. To let someone see all of it and stay anyway. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I was with Sarah since we were 20. I don't know how to date or start over or open up to someone new. I'm basically making this up as I go. That makes two of us. I'm pretty sure nobody actually knows what they're doing. We're all just trying our best and hoping we don't screw it up too badly. That's comforting and terrifying at the same time. Welcome to being human. Vanessa stood, pulling him up with her. Come on, walk with me some more. Tell me about the happier things. What makes Oliver laugh? What's his favorite dinosaur? What does he want to be when he grows up? They walked for another hour, conversation flowing from Oliver to childhood memories to favorite books to places they'd like to visit someday. The sun was starting to sink lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, when Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Party's wrapping up. Should I bring Oliver home or do you need more time? Daniel checked the time and felt a jolt of surprise. It was almost 5. He'd been with Vanessa for over 3 hours, and it had felt like minutes. I should get going, he said reluctantly. Oliver's birthday party is ending. Of course. Vanessa walked him back toward where he'd parked, neither of them in any hurry. When they reached his truck, she turned to him, her expression soft. I had a really good time today. So did I. Better than I expected, actually. Art galleries might be my new thing. Liar. But I appreciate the effort. She stepped closer. Daniel, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. His pulse quickened. Okay. Do you want this? Us? Whatever this is becoming, because I'm all in if you are. But if you're just going through the motions or doing this because you think you should move on, I need to know. I'm not interested in being someone's guilt-driven attempt at healing. The question hung between them, sharp and necessary. Daniel could have deflected, could have given her a safe non-answer, but Vanessa deserved more than that. She deserved the truth. I'm terrified, he said. Every time I start to feel something for you, part of me feels like I'm betraying Sarah, like I'm replacing her or forgetting her or moving on too fast even though it's been 4 years. That fear is constant, but Vanessa's expression didn't change, just remained steady and open. But, Daniel continued, there's something else too. When I'm with you, I feel like myself again, not just Oliver's dad or the grieving widower, but Daniel, someone who can have conversations that matter and laugh and imagine a future that's more than just getting through each day. You make me want to try, to risk getting hurt because the alternative is staying closed off forever. So what are you saying? I'm saying yes. I want this. I want to see where this goes. It scares the hell out of me, but I want it. The smile that spread across Vanessa's face was worth every ounce of fear. She rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and brief, but full of promise. Daniel's hands found her waist, steadying them both, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this. The warmth of her lips, the solid reality of her presence, the possibility of something new growing from the ruins of his old life. When they pulled apart, Vanessa rested her forehead against his. Thank you for being honest, she whispered. Thank you for asking. They stood like that for another moment before Daniel reluctantly stepped back. I really do need to go. But can we do this again? Soon? How about dinner later this week? I could cook. You could bring Oliver if you want. No pressure, just the 3 of us hanging out. Daniel's heart stuttered. You want to meet him? Only if you're ready. I meant what I said, no pressure. But yeah, I'd like to meet the kid who likes dinosaurs and makes you smile when you talk about him. Let me think about it. Make sure he's ready too. Of course. Just text me. One more quick kiss, and then Daniel climbed into his truck and pulled away from the curb. In his rearview mirror, he watched Vanessa stand on the sidewalk, waving, until he turned the corner and she disappeared from sight. The drive home felt different than any drive he'd taken in years. Lighter somehow, like he was carrying less weight than when he'd started the day. His phone rang through the truck's speakers. Marcus. Hey, we're pulling up to your place now. How'd it go? Good. Really good. That's it? Come on, man. Details. I'll tell you later. Is Oliver okay? He's sugar high and talking nonstop about the bounce house and how Tommy's dad let them have 3 pieces of cake. You're welcome for the bedtime nightmare that's about to be. Daniel laughed. Thanks for taking him. Any time, Nut. You know I love that kid. Now hurry up and get home so I can get the real story about your date.
By the time Daniel pulled into his driveway, Marcus's car was already parked in front, and Oliver was racing around the front yard demonstrating what appeared to be a complex series of bouncing techniques. Papa, you should have seen it! The bounce house was shaped like a castle, and you could jump so high you almost hit the ceiling. Daniel scooped his son up, breathing in the scent of sugar and childhood joy. Sounds amazing, buddy. It was the best, and we had pizza and cake and ice cream, and Tommy's mom let us play this game where you had to pin the tail on the donkey, but I put it on his head instead, and everyone laughed. Marcus appeared beside them, grinning. So, gallery opening, huh? How cultured did you feel? Extremely cultured. I even understood some of the art. Look at you, becoming a sophisticate. Next thing you know, you'll be drinking wine and discussing symbolism. I did drink wine. And it was fine. The art was actually interesting. Vanessa's friend, who's the artist, was cool. Oliver wiggled in Daniel's arms. Can we have pizza for dinner? We had pizza at the party, but I'm hungry again. You literally just ate 3 pieces of cake, Marcus said. That was dessert. I need real food. Daniel set Oliver down. We'll figure something out. Say thank you to Marcus for taking you. Thank you, Uncle Marcus. Oliver hugged Marcus's legs, then darted toward the house. I'm going to go tell Mr. Chomps about the party. Mr. Chomps was the stuffed triceratops, apparently sentient enough to hear about birthday parties. Daniel watched his son disappear inside, then turned to Marcus. She wants to meet him. Oliver. Marcus's eyebrows rose. That's big. Yeah. How do you feel about it? Terrified. Hopeful. Both. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I told her I'd think about it. Make sure Oliver's ready. You want my opinion? Not really, but you'll give it anyway. Oliver's ready. Kids are resilient. And from what you've told me, Vanessa isn't going to push or try to replace Sarah. She just wants to know the most important person in your life. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Don't overthink it, man. If it feels right, do it. After Marcus left, Daniel went inside to find Oliver sprawled on the living room floor, telling an extremely elaborate story to his dinosaur collection. Daniel sat on the couch and watched, letting the familiar scene wash over him. This was his life. This house where Sarah had picked out paint colors and argued with him about furniture placement. This kid who had her smile and her sense of humor. These memories that lived in every corner, every photograph, every object that had once been part of their shared existence. And now there was Vanessa, someone new, stepping into the space that had been frozen in time for 4 years. Someone who made him feel things he'd thought were dead. Anticipation, attraction, the flutter of new possibility. Could both things exist together? Could he honor what he'd lost while building something new? Oliver looked up from his dinosaurs. Papa, you're doing that thing again. What thing? Where you look sad, but you're trying not to look sad. Daniel's throat tightened. Come here, buddy. Oliver climbed onto the couch and into Daniel's lap, fitting perfectly against his chest the way he had since he was a baby. Daniel wrapped his arms around him. I'm not sad, he said. I'm just thinking. About what? About how much I love you, and about how our family might change a little. In a good way. Oliver pulled back to look at his face. Does this have to do with Vanessa? Maybe. How would you feel about meeting her sometime? Like having her over for dinner? Would she eat with us? Yeah. And talk to me? Of course. Oliver considered this seriously. Does she know about dinosaurs? Some, but I bet she'd love to learn more from you. Okay, she can come for dinner. But Papa? Yeah, buddy? I still miss Mom, even if I don't remember her that much. Is that weird? Daniel felt his heart crack open. No, baby, that's not weird at all. I miss her too, every day. Will Vanessa be mad if I talk about Mom? No, she knows all about Mom, and she knows that Mom will always be important to us. Daniel kissed the top of Oliver's head. Nothing and nobody will ever change that, okay? Okay. Oliver relaxed against him again. Can we have mac and cheese for dinner? Yeah, we can have mac and cheese. They stayed like that for a while longer. Father and son tangled together on the couch while evening light faded from the windows. And Daniel thought about courage. Not the flashy kind that conquered mountains, but the quiet kind that showed up every day. The kind that said yes to possibility even when it was terrifying. The kind that let new love grow alongside old grief. Later, after mac and cheese and bath time and 2 chapters of their book, after Oliver finally fell asleep clutching Mr. Chomps, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed and pulled out his phone. He opened his text thread with Vanessa and typed, "Dinner at our place Friday night? Oliver wants to meet you. Fair warning, he will absolutely quiz you about dinosaurs." Her response came almost immediately. "I'll start studying. Can I bring anything?" "Just yourself. And maybe low expectations about my cooking. I'm sure it'll be perfect. Thank you for this, Daniel, for trusting me with something so important." Daniel stared at those words for a long time. Trust. That's what this was. A leap of faith into unknown territory, trusting that Vanessa would handle his heart and his son with care. Trusting that he could open himself up again without losing the parts of himself that still belonged to Sarah. It was terrifying. It was necessary. It was maybe the bravest thing he'd done in 4 years. He typed back, "See you Friday, 7 o'clock. Prepare to be interrogated by a 5-year-old. Can't wait." Daniel set his phone aside and lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling where shadows played in the dim light from the hallway. In the next room, Oliver's soft breathing was just audible. Outside, the city hummed with its nighttime rhythm, and somewhere in all of that, in the grief and the hope, the fear and the trust, the endings and the beginnings, Daniel felt something that had been absent for so long he'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Peace. Not the kind that meant everything was resolved or healed, but the kind that came from finally allowing himself to believe that maybe his story wasn't over after all. Friday arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made everything feel both too fast and too slow. Daniel spent the morning at the shop going through the motions of an oil change while his mind spun through dinner scenarios, most of them involving Oliver asking inappropriate questions or the food catching fire, or some combination of both. "Boss, you're going to strip that drain plug if you keep cranking on it like that," Jake said from under the adjacent lift. Daniel blinked, realizing he'd been over-tightening the bolt. "Right, thanks. You okay? You've been weird all week." "I'm fine." "You're having that woman over for dinner tonight, aren't you? The one Marcus set you up with." Daniel didn't bother asking how Jake knew. Marcus had a big mouth and the shop was small. "Yeah. And you're freaking out." "I'm not freaking out." "You just tried to over-torque a drain plug. You never do that. You're definitely freaking out." Jake rolled out from under the car he was working on, his face smudged with grease. "Want some advice?" "Not particularly." "Too bad. Here it is anyway. Stop overthinking it. Cook something simple. Be yourself. Let your kid be himself. If she's worth keeping around, she'll handle it." "When did you become a relationship expert?" "I've had 3 girlfriends in the last 2 years. I'm basically a professional at this point." "Those relationships lasted a combined total of 4 months." "Exactly. I learned what not to do very efficiently." Jake grinned. "Seriously though, you'll be fine. Just don't make anything too fancy. Keep it low pressure." Daniel took the advice to heart. After work, he stopped at the grocery store and bought ingredients for spaghetti and meatballs, Oliver's favorite, something he could make in his sleep, nothing that required impressive culinary skills or exotic ingredients. He also grabbed a bottle of wine, stared at it for 5 minutes, wondering if that was too presumptuous, put it back, then grabbed it again. By the time he got home, Oliver was already vibrating with anticipation. Mrs. Chen had picked him up from school and was helping him organize his dinosaur collection in the living room. "We must make good impression," she said when Daniel walked in. "So I help Oliver clean his toys. Also, I make cookies. Fresh cookies always make people happy." "Mrs. Chen, you didn't have to—" "Of course I did. This is important." She patted his arm, then leaned in conspiratorially. "She is nice lady, yes? Good for you and Oliver?" "I think so. I hope so." "Then we make sure everything is perfect." She surveyed the living room with satisfaction. "There. Very nice. Very welcoming. Now I go home and let you prepare. You need anything? I am right next door." After she left, Daniel stood in the middle of his living room and saw it through a stranger's eyes. The furniture was worn but comfortable, mostly hand-me-downs and thrift store finds. Framed photos covered every available surface. Sarah pregnant with Oliver, their wedding day, family vacations, Oliver's school pictures. The house was a shrine to their life before, frozen in time. "Papa, should I wear my dinosaur shirt or my regular shirt?" Oliver appeared at the top of the stairs. "What's wrong with what you're wearing now?" "Mrs. Chen said I should look nice for company." Daniel climbed the stairs to his son's room, where Oliver had laid out two options on his bed, a green t-shirt with a T-Rex on it, and a plain blue polo that Sarah had bought for a cousin's wedding 2 years ago. "The dinosaur shirt," Daniel said. "Vanessa should meet the real you, not some dressed-up version." "Okay, good, because the other one is itchy." They went back downstairs together, and Daniel started on dinner, letting Oliver help where he could. His son carefully counted out meatballs onto the baking sheet, tongue poking out in concentration, while Daniel chopped garlic and onions for the sauce. "Papa?" "Yeah, buddy?" "What if she doesn't like me?" Daniel's hand stilled on the cutting board. He turned to look at Oliver, who was staring at the meatballs with unusual intensity. "Why would you think that?" Oliver shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "Tommy at school said his dad's girlfriend didn't like kids, so she left." "What if Vanessa doesn't like kids?" Daniel crouched down to Oliver's level. "First of all, Vanessa already knows about you. She's coming over specifically to meet you. Second, anyone who doesn't like you is someone we don't need in our lives. But I really don't think you have to worry about that." "How do you know?" "Because when I talk about you, her whole face lights up. She asks questions about you all the time. What you like, what you're good at, what makes you laugh. Someone who's that interested in hearing about you definitely wants to know you." Oliver considered this. "Does she know I'm really good at dinosaur facts?" "She knows. In fact, she's been studying up so she can talk to you about them." "Really? Really?" That seemed to satisfy Oliver, who returned his attention to the meatballs. Daniel went back to cooking, his heart aching at the vulnerability his son had just shown. Of course Oliver was worried. He'd spent his entire conscious life in a two-person family, just him and Daniel. The idea of someone new entering that carefully balanced equation was probably terrifying for him too. The sauce was simmering and the water was boiling for pasta when the doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Daniel wiped his hands on a towel, suddenly aware that he was still wearing his work jeans and had a sauce stain on his shirt. "I'll get it." Oliver raced to the door before Daniel could stop him. When he pulled it open, Vanessa stood on the porch holding a bouquet of flowers and a small gift bag. She wore jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, and when she saw Oliver, she smiled warmly. "Hi, you must be Oliver." Oliver stared up at her with wide eyes. "Are those flowers?" "They are. These are for your dad, but this," she held up the gift bag, "is for you. If that's okay with your dad." Daniel had reached the door by then. "Of course it's okay. Come in, please." Vanessa stepped inside and handed him the flowers. Sunflowers and daisies, bright and cheerful. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I went with happy." "They're perfect. Thank you." Daniel gestured toward the kitchen. "I should put these in water. Oliver, you want to show Vanessa where to put her coat?" While Oliver carefully hung Vanessa's jacket in the coat closet with endearing seriousness, Daniel found a vase and tried to arrange the flowers in some semblance of order. His hands were shaking slightly. Through the doorway, he could hear Vanessa and Oliver. "So what's in the bag?" Oliver asked. "Why don't you open it and see?" There was the sound of tissue paper rustling, then Oliver's gasp of pure delight. "It's a velociraptor, and it's the accurate kind with feathers, not the movie kind." "I heard you were particular about scientific accuracy." Daniel came back into the living room to find Oliver clutching a detailed model of a velociraptor, examining it from every angle with the focused intensity he usually reserved for museum exhibits. "This is so cool! Papa, look, it even has the killing claw at the right angle." "I see that. That's really cool, buddy. What do you say?" "Thank you." Oliver launched himself at Vanessa with the uninhibited affection of a 5-year-old wrapping his arms around her waist. "This is the best present ever." Vanessa looked momentarily startled, then delighted. She hugged him back gently. "I'm so glad you like it." "Like it? I love it! Can I go put it with my other dinosaurs?" "Of course," Daniel said. Oliver thundered up the stairs, already narrating an elaborate story about the velociraptor joining his collection. In the sudden quiet, Daniel and Vanessa looked at each other. You didn't have to bring him anything, Daniel said. I wanted to. I know how important dinosaurs are to him. She stepped closer. Hi, by the way. Properly hi. Hi. He kissed her softly, aware that Oliver could come back down at any moment. I'm glad you're here. Me too. Something smells amazing. Just spaghetti and meatballs, nothing fancy. My favorite kind of meal. Dinner turned out better than Daniel had dared to hope. Oliver dominated the conversation, peppering Vanessa with questions about everything from her favorite color to whether she thought pterosaurs were underrated. Vanessa answered each question with genuine interest, never talking down to him, treating his opinions with the respect usually reserved for adults. So what do you do for work? Oliver asked around a mouthful of spaghetti. I run a company that makes computer programs. Like video games? Not quite. We make programs that help people who run charities. So if someone is trying to feed hungry people or help sick kids, we give them tools to do that better. Oliver processed this. So you help people help people? Vanessa's face lit up. That's exactly right. I've never heard it put that way before, but yes. That's cool. Papa helps people too. He fixes their cars so they can get to work and stuff. Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest at the pride in Oliver's voice. Your papa is pretty great, Vanessa said, catching Daniel's eye across the table. I know. Oliver twirled more spaghetti onto his fork. He makes really good pancakes. And he never gets mad when I ask too many questions. And he reads me stories every night, even when he's really tired. Those all sound like excellent papa qualities. After dinner, Oliver insisted on showing Vanessa his room and his complete dinosaur collection. Daniel followed them upstairs, watching as his son pulled out book after book, explaining the differences between carnivores and herbivores, demonstrating the proper pronunciation of difficult names like Pachycephalosaurus. Vanessa sat cross-legged on Oliver's floor, asking questions and listening with the same focused attention she gave to everything else. She didn't check her phone or glance at her watch or show any sign of impatience with a 5-year-old's rambling enthusiasm. And this one, Oliver said, holding up the velociraptor she'd given him, is now my favorite because velociraptors were actually really smart. They hunted in packs and could problem solve. They were like the wolves of the dinosaur world. I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Most people don't know that. They just know about T-Rexes because of movies. But velociraptors were way cooler. I'm learning so much tonight, Oliver beamed. Then he looked at the clock on his nightstand and his face fell. It's almost bedtime. Yeah, buddy, it is, Daniel said from the doorway. Why don't you start getting ready? Brush your teeth, put on pajamas? But Vanessa just got here. I'll still be here when you're done, Vanessa said gently. And maybe, if it's okay with your dad, I can say goodnight before I leave. Oliver looked at Daniel hopefully. Sure, go get ready for bed. While Oliver was in the bathroom, Daniel and Vanessa went back downstairs. Daniel poured 2 glasses of the wine he'd bought, and they settled on the couch, the same couch where he and Sarah had sat countless times, where they'd watched movies and talked about their days and planned their future. He's wonderful, Vanessa said. Funny and smart and so full of joy. You've done an amazing job with him, Daniel. He makes it easy. Most of the time, anyway. Daniel sipped his wine. Thank you for the dinosaur and for being so patient with all his questions. Are you kidding? I loved it. He's got more enthusiasm in his pinky finger than most adults have in their whole body. She paused. Can I ask you something? Of course. The photos everywhere, of your wife, of your family before. Are you worried about how I feel about them? Daniel's stomach clenched. Should I be? No, I just want you to know that I'm not here to replace her or erase her memory. I would never ask you to take those pictures down or stop talking about her. She's Oliver's mother. She was your wife. She'll always be part of this family. The relief Daniel felt was almost physical. Most people don't understand that. They think moving forward means putting away the past. Well, I'm not most people. Vanessa set down her wine glass. I watched my friend lose her husband in a car accident. She had people telling her to pack up his things, redecorate, make a fresh start. Like erasing the evidence of him would somehow make the grief less. And I remember thinking how cruel that was. How wrong. What did she do? Kept his things exactly where they were for 2 years. Then, when she was ready, she slowly started making changes. Not because someone told her to, but because she wanted to, on her timeline. Vanessa looked around the room, at the photos of Sarah smiling from the mantel, from the walls, from the bookshelf. Whenever you're ready to make changes, that's the right time, not before. Daniel felt something unknot in his chest. I was worried you'd think it was weird, that I'm not over her. Are you supposed to be over losing the person you built a life with? The mother of your child? Vanessa shook her head. That's not how love works. You don't stop loving someone just because they're gone. You just learn to carry it differently. That's exactly it. I keep waiting for the day when it doesn't hurt anymore, but I'm starting to think that day isn't coming. The hurt just becomes part of the landscape, background noise instead of a siren. And that's okay. Grief doesn't have an expiration date. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Upstairs, Daniel could hear Oliver brushing his teeth, singing some song he'd learned at school. Normal sounds of a normal evening, except nothing about this felt normal. Having Vanessa here, in his home, sitting where Sarah used to sit, talking about things that mattered, it was surreal and comforting at the same time. "Papa," Oliver called from upstairs. "I'm ready." Daniel and Vanessa climbed the stairs together. Oliver was already in bed, covers pulled up to his chin, Mr. Chomps tucked under one arm, and the new velociraptor under the other. "Can Vanessa stay for story time?" he asked. Daniel looked at Vanessa, who nodded. "I'd love to." They settled on either side of Oliver's bed, Daniel in his usual spot and Vanessa perched on the edge. Daniel read from their current chapter book, his voice falling into the familiar rhythm of the story. Halfway through the second chapter, Oliver's eyes started to droop. "One more chapter," he mumbled. "Please." "Nice try, buddy. We'll read more tomorrow." Daniel finished the chapter they'd started, then closed the book. Oliver was fighting sleep now, his eyes opening and closing slowly. "Vanessa?" His voice was small and sleepy. "Yeah, Oliver." "Are you Papa's girlfriend?" Vanessa glanced at Daniel, who suddenly found the book in his hands very interesting. "We're friends who like spending time together. Is that okay?" "I guess so, as long as you keep liking dinosaurs." "I promise." "Okay. Good night, Vanessa." "Good night, Oliver." Daniel kissed his son's forehead, tucked the blankets more snugly around him. "Love you, buddy." "Love you too, Papa." Oliver's eyes opened one more time. "Vanessa?" "Yeah." "I'm glad you came for dinner." The smile that crossed Vanessa's face was radiant. "Me too. Thank you for sharing your dinosaurs with me." Oliver nodded, satisfied, and let his eyes close. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Daniel stood, gestured for Vanessa to follow, and they crept out of the room, leaving the door cracked open the way Oliver liked it. Downstairs, they returned to the couch. Daniel felt emotionally wrung out in the way that only came from high-stakes vulnerability, but also lighter than he had in weeks. "So," Vanessa said, "I think that went well. He loved you, obviously. The feeling is mutual. He's such a great kid, Daniel. Even when he's asking if you're my girlfriend? Especially then." Vanessa shifted to face him more fully. "For what it's worth, I didn't know how to answer that question. I don't want to presume anything about what this is or where it's going." "What do you want it to be?" She considered that. "Honestly, I want to keep doing this, getting to know you and Oliver, having conversations that matter, seeing where it goes without rushing or forcing anything. I want to be in your life, however that looks." "I want that too." Daniel took her hand. "But I need you to know that it's going to be complicated. Oliver has to come first. Always. And there will be days when I'm drowning in grief and not great company. Days when I can't separate the past from the present." "I know. And I'm not asking you to be anything other than what you are. A father who loves his son and is still learning how to navigate loss. I can handle complicated, Daniel. What I can't handle is dishonesty or half measures. If you're with me, I need you to really be with me, present and trying even when it's hard." "I can do that?" "Then we're okay." She squeezed his hand. "Now, I should probably get going. It's late and you have a 5-year-old who'll be up at the crack of dawn." Daniel walked her to the door, helped her into her coat. On the porch, under the yellow glow of the porch light, Vanessa turned to him. "Thank you for tonight, for trusting me with this. Thank you for making it easy." She kissed him, deeper than before, her hands coming up to frame his face. Daniel pulled her closer, letting himself sink into the moment, into the feeling of being wanted and seen and chosen. When they finally pulled apart, both were slightly breathless. "I'll call you tomorrow," Vanessa said. "Please." He watched her walk to her car, waited until she'd pulled away before going back inside. The house felt different now, like Vanessa's presence had shifted something fundamental in the atmosphere. Daniel cleaned up the dinner dishes, put away the leftovers, wiped down the counters. Normal tasks that felt anything but normal. His phone buzzed, a text from Vanessa. "Home safe, tonight was perfect. Oliver is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to know you both." Daniel typed back, "We're the lucky ones. Sleep well." He checked on Oliver one more time before heading to his own room. His son was sprawled across the bed, one leg sticking out from under the covers, both dinosaurs clutched tight. Daniel adjusted the blanket, smoothed Oliver's hair back from his forehead. "Love you, buddy," he whispered. In his own room, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed and looked at the framed photo on his nightstand. Sarah on their wedding day, radiant in her white dress, laughing at something someone had said. He picked up the frame, traced her face with his thumb. "I hope this is okay," he said to the photo, to her memory, to the universe. "I hope you'd understand. I'm trying to do right by Oliver, trying to show him that it's okay to keep living even when we miss you, that love doesn't have to end just because you're gone." The photo didn't answer, of course, but Daniel felt something settle in his chest anyway, a sense that maybe Sarah would approve of Vanessa. Maybe she'd be glad that Daniel was finally letting someone else in. Maybe she'd want him to be happy, even if that happiness came in a form different than what they'd planned. He set the photo back on the nightstand and got ready for bed. As he lay in the dark, Daniel thought about Oliver's question. "Are you Papa's girlfriend?" And Vanessa's answer, "We're friends who like spending time together." It was a careful answer, a safe one. But Daniel found himself hoping that maybe, someday, the answer could be different. That Vanessa could be more than just someone he liked spending time with. That she could be part of their family in a real, lasting way. The thought didn't feel like betrayal anymore. It felt like possibility. Sleep came easier that night than it had in years. And when Daniel dreamed, it wasn't of loss or longing or the life that used to be. It was of Sunday afternoons and dinosaur facts and a woman with kind eyes who listened like every word mattered. The next few weeks unfolded in a pattern that felt both foreign and natural. Vanessa came for dinner again the following week, and then the week after that. Each visit felt easier than the last, the three of them settling into a rhythm that surprised Daniel with its comfort. Oliver took to Vanessa immediately, dragging her into his imaginative games and lengthy explanations about the Cretaceous period. She never seemed bored or impatient, entering into his world with enthusiasm that Daniel found both touching and attractive. They started doing things together on weekends, trips to the aquarium, walks through the park, breakfast at the diner. Oliver loved because they made pancakes in animal shapes. Daniel watched Vanessa interact with his son and saw someone who genuinely enjoyed Oliver's company, who didn't see him as an obstacle or complication, but as a person worth knowing. But it wasn't all easy. There were moments when Daniel felt overwhelmed by the speed at which his life was changing. Moments when he'd catch himself laughing at something Vanessa said and feel guilty for that joy. Moments when Oliver would call Vanessa by Sarah's name by accident, and Daniel would have to leave the room to collect himself. Vanessa handled all of it with grace. When Daniel got quiet and withdrawn, she gave him space. When Oliver had a meltdown about missing his mom, she stepped back and let Daniel handle it. She never pushed, never demanded more than Daniel could give, never made him feel bad for the days when grief sat heavier than hope. 3 weeks after that first dinner, Daniel was closing up the shop when Vanessa called. Her voice sounded strained. "Hey, I know this is last minute, but are you busy tonight?" "Just finishing up at work. Oliver's with Mrs. Chen. What's going on?" "I had a really terrible day and I could use some company. But if you can't, I understand. Give me 30 minutes. I'll be there." He found her at her apartment, a sleek modern space in one of the new buildings downtown. She opened the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her eyes red-rimmed. "What happened?" Daniel asked, pulling her into a hug. "We lost our biggest client today. They're moving to a competitor." Vanessa's voice was muffled against his shoulder. "And it's my fault. I made a bad call 6 months ago, and now 30 people might lose their jobs because I screwed up. Daniel guided her to the couch, sat beside her. Tell me everything. She did. The whole story poured out, the decisions that had seemed right at the time, the warning signs she'd missed, the meeting that morning where the client had walked away. Through it all, Daniel listened the way she'd listened to him, without judgment or empty reassurances. I keep thinking I should know better by now, Vanessa said when she'd finished. I've been doing this for 8 years. I shouldn't still be making rookie mistakes. You're human. Humans make mistakes, even CEOs. My employees don't have the luxury of my mistakes. Their mortgages and families and futures are riding on my decisions. Daniel understood that weight intimately. So what are you going to do? I don't know. Cut costs? Maybe lose some positions through attrition instead of layoffs. Work harder to find new clients to replace the revenue. She wiped at her eyes. Mostly just try not to panic. Can I tell you what I see? Please. I see someone who cares deeply about her people, who takes responsibility when things go wrong instead of blaming others, who's willing to work her ass off to fix it. Daniel took her hand. Those are the qualities of a good leader, Vanessa. The mistake doesn't erase that. It feels like it does. I know, but it doesn't. He pulled her closer. When Sarah was dying, I made so many mistakes. Decisions about her treatment that might have been wrong. Times I got frustrated with her when I should have been patient. Moments I was so focused on practical things that I forgot to just be present with her. And after she died, those mistakes haunted me. Still do sometimes. Still do.
How do you live with it? By accepting that I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. By understanding that being imperfect doesn't make me a failure. By letting the people who love me remind me of my worth when I forget. He kissed her forehead. Like I'm reminding you now. Vanessa cried then, really cried, and Daniel held her through it. When she finally pulled back, she gave him a watery smile. How did I get so lucky to find you? Pretty sure I'm the lucky one. They ordered Thai food and ate it curled up on her couch, watching a mindless comedy neither of them really paid attention to. Vanessa rested her head on Daniel's shoulder, his arm around her, and the simple intimacy of it felt monumental. This was what partnership looked like, Daniel realized. Not just the fun dates and easy moments, but showing up when things were hard, holding space for each other's pain, being strong when the other person needed to be weak. Thank you for coming, Vanessa said during a commercial break. Always. You've been showing up for me and Oliver for weeks. I'm just returning the favor. It doesn't feel like a favor. It feels like, what? Like something I could get used to. Having someone to call when everything falls apart. Someone who doesn't need me to have all the answers. Daniel's heart kicked against his ribs. I could get used to that too. They looked at each other, something shifting in the air between them. Vanessa's hand came up to cup his face. I'm falling for you, she said quietly. I know it's fast and complicated and maybe not the smartest thing, but I am. The confession landed like a weight and a gift at the same time. Daniel knew he should be careful, should protect himself and Oliver from potential hurt. But looking into Vanessa's eyes, he found he didn't want to be careful anymore. I'm falling for you, too, he said. When they kissed, it felt different than before. Deeper, more certain. Like they were both finally admitting to something that had been building since that first dinner at Meridian. Daniel stayed until late, until Vanessa's tears had dried and her smile had returned, and she'd made a plan for addressing the work crisis. On the drive home, he felt something like peace settling over him. He was moving forward, not away from Sarah or the life they'd built, but into something new that could exist alongside those memories. It didn't have to be either or. It could be both and. When he got home, Mrs. Chen met him at the door. Everything okay? She asked. Yeah, Vanessa had a rough day at work. I just went to keep her company. Mrs. Chen's smile was knowing. You are a good man, Daniel. She is lucky to have you. I'm pretty lucky too. That night, after checking on Oliver and getting ready for bed, Daniel looked at Sarah's photo again. I think you'd like her, he said. I think you'd be glad Oliver has someone else who cares about him, someone else who shows up. He paused. I hope wherever you are, you know I'll never stop loving you. But I think I'm ready to love someone else too. Not instead of you. Alongside you. The house was quiet. The night was still. But Daniel felt, for the first time since Sarah's death, like he had permission to be happy. Not from her exactly. She wasn't here to give it. But from himself. From the part of him that knew she would have wanted him to keep living, to keep loving, to keep opening his heart even when it was scary. In the darkness of his room, Daniel smiled. Tomorrow he'd wake up early, make Oliver dinosaur pancakes, fix engines at the shop, and maybe text Vanessa to see how she was feeling. The same routine he'd followed for years, but somehow completely transformed by the presence of someone who saw him, really saw him, and chose to stay anyway. It was terrifying and exhilarating and beautiful. It was, he thought, as sleep finally claimed him, exactly what hope felt like when you were brave enough to let it in. 2 months passed in a blur of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary precisely because they were shared. Vanessa became a fixture in Daniel and Oliver's life. Not intrusive, not replacing anything, but adding something that had been missing without them realizing it. She showed up for Oliver's school play where he played a stegosaurus with more enthusiasm than accuracy. She brought soup when Daniel caught a cold and couldn't work for 3 days. She sat through countless dinosaur documentaries and never once complained about the repetition. And slowly, carefully, Daniel felt the walls around his heart continue to crumble. It was a Saturday in late November when everything shifted into sharper focus. The three of them were at the Seattle Center, Oliver racing ahead on the path while Daniel and Vanessa walked behind, hands linked, their breath fogging in the cold air. "Papa! Vanessa, come see!" Oliver was pointing at something near the fountain, bouncing on his toes with excitement. They jogged to catch up and found him staring at a small memorial plaque embedded in the concrete. It commemorated someone's mother, beloved and missed, with dates that showed she'd died young. Oliver traced the letters with his finger. "Papa, is Mom's name somewhere like this?" Daniel's throat constricted. "No, buddy, but she has a headstone at the cemetery, remember? We visit sometimes." "Can we go today?" The request caught Daniel off guard. They hadn't been to Sarah's grave in months, and Oliver had never asked to go before. Usually Daniel had to coax him, worried that avoiding it would make it worse somehow. "Sure, if you want to." Oliver nodded seriously. Then he looked up at Vanessa. "Will you come too?" Daniel saw the flash of uncertainty cross Vanessa's face. This was sacred ground, literally and figuratively. He started to offer her an out, but she spoke first. "I would be honored, if your papa says it's okay." Daniel met her eyes and saw the question there, the willingness to step back if this was too much, too soon. But something in him wanted her there, wanted her to see this part of his life too, the raw grief that still lived beneath the surface of their everyday happiness. "Yeah," he said, "come with us." They drove to the cemetery in Vanessa's car, Oliver chattering in the back seat about whether his mom could see them from wherever she was. Daniel fielded the questions as best he could, the same way he always did, honest but gentle, leaving room for mystery and hope. The cemetery was quiet, dotted with other visitors paying their respects. Daniel led them through the rows of headstones to a plot beneath a maple tree, its branches now bare for winter. Sarah's headstone was simple granite with her name, dates, and the inscription Daniel had chosen. "Beloved wife and mother, forever in our hearts." Oliver immediately plopped down on the grass in front of the stone, talking to it like Sarah might actually hear him. "Hi, Mom. I brought Papa and his friend Vanessa. She's really nice. She knows a lot about dinosaurs, but not as much as me. She brought me a velociraptor with feathers and everything." He paused, then added solemnly, "I miss you. Papa says you're watching over us. I hope that's true." Daniel knelt beside his son, one hand on Oliver's shoulder. Vanessa stood a few feet back, giving them space, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. "We're doing okay, Sarah," Daniel said quietly, addressing the stone and the memory it represented. "Oliver's growing so fast. He's so smart it scares me sometimes. Reminds me of you, the way you could figure anything out if you put your mind to it." His voice caught. "I'm trying to be enough for him, trying to be what you would have been if you were still here." "You are enough, Papa," Oliver said, leaning against him. "You're the best papa ever." The simple declaration nearly broke Daniel. He pulled Oliver into a tight hug, breathing in the little boy's scent of him, shampoo and graham crackers and playground dirt. When Daniel looked up, Vanessa had tears streaming down her face.
She wiped at them quickly, but not before Daniel saw the depth of emotion there. Not pity, something closer to reverence. Like she understood the holiness of this moment, a father and son honoring the woman who connected them. They stayed for another 10 minutes, Oliver telling Sarah about school and his friends and the book they were reading. Daniel added updates about the shop, the house, the small victories and struggles of daily life. And through it all, Vanessa stood witness, silent and respectful. As they walked back to the car, Oliver slipped his hand into Vanessa's. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for including me."
Do you think she would have liked you, my mom? Vanessa glanced at Daniel, who nodded encouragement. I don't know, she said honestly, but I hope so. I hope she would see how much I care about you and your papa, and know that I'm trying my best to be a good part of your lives. Oliver considered this as they reached the car. I think she would like you. Papa laughs more now, and he's not as sad all the time. The observation hung in the air. Daniel hadn't realized how much Oliver had been paying attention, tracking the shifts in Daniel's emotional landscape. Of course he had been. Kids always noticed more than adults gave them credit for. On the drive back, Oliver fell asleep in his car seat, exhausted by the emotional weight of the afternoon. Daniel and Vanessa sat in the front, the heater humming, neither speaking for several minutes. Finally, Vanessa broke the silence. Thank you for letting me be there. I know that was hard. It was. But it also felt right. Daniel reached for her hand. I've spent 4 years keeping those worlds separate, my grief and my present life. But they're not separate. They're all part of the same story. And I want you in that story, Vanessa. All of it. Are you sure? Because once you let me all the way in, I'm not going anywhere. I'm committed to this. To you and Oliver, for as long as you'll have me. The weight of that commitment should have scared him. Instead, it felt like coming home. I'm sure, Daniel said. That evening, after putting Oliver to bed, Daniel and Vanessa sat on his back porch, despite the cold, wrapped in a blanket, drinking hot chocolate Mrs. Chen had made before tactfully retreating to her own house. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. Always. When did you know that this was real, that you wanted to stay? Vanessa was quiet for a moment, her breath visible in the cold air. Remember that first dinner when you talked about Oliver and started crying? Most men would have been embarrassed or tried to change the subject, but you just let yourself feel it. You were so honest about how hard everything was, how scared you were, how much you loved your son, and I thought, this is a man who knows what matters, who isn't afraid to be vulnerable, who leads with his heart even when it's broken. She turned to look at him. That's when I knew. I wanted to know someone that brave. I don't feel brave. The bravest people never do. They just keep showing up anyway. Daniel kissed her, tasting chocolate and promise. Move in with us, he heard himself say. Vanessa pulled back, eyes wide. What? Move in, not right away. We can take our time, do it gradually, make sure Oliver's comfortable with the transition. But I want you here. I want to wake up next to you. I want Oliver to see what it looks like when two people choose each other every day. I want to build something with you. Daniel, that's huge. Are you sure you're ready? Was he ready? The question echoed through him. 4 years ago, he'd have said he'd never be ready, that his life was complete with just him and Oliver, that adding anyone else would be a betrayal of what he'd lost. But sitting here with Vanessa, thinking about the past 2 months of shared meals and easy laughter, and the way Oliver's face lit up when she arrived, Daniel realized that, ready or not, this was what he wanted, what they all needed. I'm terrified, he admitted, but I'm also sure. The two can exist together. Vanessa's smile was radiant even in the darkness. Then yes, I'll move in, gradually, carefully, making sure we do this right for Oliver. They sealed it with another kiss, deeper this time, full of intention and hope and the promise of a future they'd build together. The transition happened over the next 6 weeks. Vanessa started staying over more nights than not, her things slowly migrating into Daniel's space. A toothbrush in the bathroom, clothes in the closet, her laptop on the kitchen table. They told Oliver together, framing it as Vanessa becoming a bigger part of their family. Oliver's response was pragmatic. Does this mean she'll be here for breakfast every day? Because I like when she makes French toast. Most days, yeah, Daniel said. Cool.
Can I go play now? Kids, Daniel thought, with a mixture of relief and amusement, were remarkably adaptable when the adults in their lives were honest and consistent. But not every moment was easy. There was the night Oliver had a nightmare about losing Daniel the way he'd lost Sarah, and Daniel had to hold him for an hour, reassuring him over and over that Papa wasn't going anywhere. Vanessa had watched from the doorway, helpless to comfort them, learning the hard truth that some pain only a parent could soothe. There was the argument Daniel and Vanessa had about discipline. She thought Daniel was too permissive. He thought she didn't understand the complexities of parenting a child who'd already lost one parent. They'd both said things they regretted, then had to model for Oliver what it looked like to apologize and work through conflict. There was the moment Daniel found Vanessa crying in the bedroom, overwhelmed by the responsibility of loving someone else's child, terrified she'd make a mistake that would damage Oliver in some irreparable way. Daniel had held her and reminded her of her own words, that kids needed people who stayed, not people who were perfect. But there were beautiful moments too. The morning Vanessa made dinosaur pancakes without being asked, and Oliver had declared them almost as good as Papa's. The evening she read bedtime stories in different voices for each character, making Oliver giggle until his sides hurt. The weekend they'd all gotten sick with the flu and had survived it together, taking turns being miserable and taking care of each other. Slowly, painfully, joyfully, they became a family. It was a warm afternoon in late March, nearly 6 months after that first dinner, when Daniel found Oliver in the backyard, arranging his plastic dinosaurs in some elaborate scenario. "What you doing, buddy?" "Setting up a scene. The plant eaters are having a meeting about how to protect themselves from the meat eaters. It's very serious." Daniel sat on the grass beside him. "Can I join the meeting?" "Sure. You can be the Triceratops leader." They played for a while, Daniel following Oliver's intricate rules and storylines. Then Oliver said, without looking up from his dinosaurs, "Papa, do you love Vanessa?" Daniel's hand stilled. "I do. Is that okay?" "I think so." Oliver moved a small stegosaurus closer to a group of other herbivores. "Does that mean she's going to be my mom now?" The question Daniel had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. He set down the Triceratops and gave Oliver his full attention. "That's complicated, buddy. Your mom will always be your mom. Nobody can replace her. But Vanessa loves you very much, and she's here to stay. If you want to think of her as a mom too, like a second mom or a bonus mom, that would be okay. But you can also just call her Vanessa. Whatever feels right to you." Oliver processed this, his face scrunched in concentration. "Can I call her Vanessa, but she still acts like a mom? Like making me breakfast and reading stories and stuff?" "Absolutely. Labels don't matter as much as what people do. If she's showing up and taking care of you and loving you, that's what makes her family, not what you call her." "Okay, good." Oliver returned to his dinosaurs. "Papa? Yeah?" "I'm glad she's here. The house feels better when she's home." Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. "Yeah, buddy, it really does." That evening, after Oliver was in bed, Daniel told Vanessa about the conversation. She listened quietly, her hand in his. "He's okay with this," Daniel said. "With us, with you being part of our family." "I want to do right by him, Daniel. I want to be what he needs." "You already are. Just by caring this much, you already are." They sat together on the couch, the house quiet around them, and Daniel felt a peace he'd thought was lost forever. His life looked nothing like he'd imagined it would at 32. He was a widower, a single father, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a modest life. But he was also a man who'd learned to let love in again, who'd chosen hope over fear, who'd built something new without destroying what came before. A week later, on a Saturday morning, the three of them were at the neighborhood playground. It was one of those perfect spring days that made Seattle feel like paradise. Clear skies, warm sun, the smell of cherry blossoms on the breeze. Oliver had made a friend, a little girl named Emma who shared his passion for dinosaurs. They were engaged in an intense debate about whether Allosaurus or T-Rex would win in a fight, their voices carrying across the playground. Daniel and Vanessa sat on a bench nearby, watching. Vanessa's head rested on Daniel's shoulder, his arm around her waist. Comfortable, easy, right. "Can I tell you something?" Vanessa said. "Anything." "When I was younger, I used to imagine what my life would look like at 30. I thought I'd have the perfect career, the perfect husband, the perfect house. Everything planned and controlled and exactly how I wanted it. She paused. This is nothing like that vision.
Daniel's stomach dropped. Is that a bad thing? No. She lifted her head to look at him, her eyes bright. It's better. Because that vision was about achievement and appearances. This is about love and messiness and showing up for real people with real problems. This is about building something that matters. Even when it's hard? Especially when it's hard. The hard parts are what make it real. Oliver ran over, breathless and flushed.
Papa, Emma wants to know if we can have a play date at our house. Can we, please? Sure, buddy. We'll talk to her mom and set something up.
Yes! Oliver fist pumped, then noticed something. You guys look happy. We are happy, Vanessa said. Good. Me too. Oliver paused, then added with the gravity only a 5-year-old could muster. Do you like dinosaurs yet, Vanessa? I mean really like them, not just pretend like them? You know what? I actually do.
Velociraptors are my favorite now. The smart, feathered ones. Oliver's face split into the widest smile Daniel had ever seen. Okay, good. You can stay. He ran back to Emma, already shouting something about herbivores and the Jurassic period. Daniel and Vanessa looked at each other and burst out laughing. High praise, Daniel said. You passed the final test. What test was that? The dinosaur test. It's the most important one. They stayed at the playground until Oliver was exhausted and hungry, then stopped for burgers on the way home. At dinner, Oliver dominated the conversation with plans for his upcoming birthday party. A dinosaur theme, naturally, with a cake shaped like a brontosaurus and games involving fossil hunting. Can Emma come? Oliver asked. And Tommy and Marcus and Mrs. Chen? Of course, Daniel said. Anyone else? Oliver looked at Vanessa. What about your family? Can they come? Vanessa looked surprised, touched. You want to meet them? Yeah. If they're your family, they should know us too. Right, Papa? Daniel met Vanessa's eyes across the table and saw the shimmer of tears she was fighting back. Right, he said. That's exactly right. The birthday party 2 weeks later was chaos in the best possible way. 20 kids hopped up on sugar, racing through the backyard on a dinosaur scavenger hunt Daniel had spent hours setting up. Vanessa's parents and siblings had driven in from Portland, bringing gifts and warmth and easy laughter. Mrs. Chen had made enough food to feed an army. Marcus served as the self-appointed entertainment coordinator, leading the kids in increasingly elaborate games. Daniel stood on the back porch surveying the controlled chaos, and felt something he'd never thought he'd feel again, complete. Not because the pain of losing Sarah was gone. It wasn't. It never would be. But because he'd finally learned that loss and love could coexist, that moving forward didn't mean leaving behind, that his heart was big enough to hold both grief and joy, memory and possibility. Vanessa appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. You did good, Papa. This party is perfect. Oliver did most of the planning. I just executed his vision. He's so happy. Look at him. They watched Oliver running through the sprinklers Marcus had set up, shrieking with laughter alongside his friends, pure, uninhibited joy. You know what I realized today? Vanessa said. What's that? That I love him. Not just because he's your son, but because he's Oliver. Because he's funny and curious and kind. Because he cares about accuracy in dinosaur facts and gets excited about French toast and asks questions that make me think harder about everything. She looked up at Daniel. I love both of you, completely. No reservations. Daniel pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. We love you too. Both of us. Later, after the guests had gone and Oliver had crashed hard from the sugar and excitement, Daniel carried his sleeping son upstairs. Vanessa followed, helping tuck him in, both of them moving with the synchronized ease of partners who'd learned each other's rhythms. Oliver stirred as Daniel pulled the blanket up. Papa? Right here, buddy. Did you have a good birthday? The best. Oliver's eyes were already closing again. Love you, Papa. Love you, Vanessa. It was the first time he'd said it to her directly. Vanessa's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. Love you too, Oliver, she whispered. They stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching him sleep, this child who'd brought them together and given them purpose. Then they went downstairs hand in hand. On the mantel, Sarah's photo still smiled out at them, frozen in time and joy. Daniel walked over to it, touched the frame gently. "I think she'd be proud of how he turned out," Vanessa said softly. "And proud of you for being brave enough to let me in." "You think?" "I know, because that's what love does. It wants the people we care about to be happy, even after we're gone." Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of it settle in his bones. Sarah would have wanted this for them, would have wanted Oliver to have someone else who loved him fiercely, would have wanted Daniel to find joy again instead of drowning in grief. He turned to Vanessa, this woman who'd walked into his life and asked the questions that mattered, who'd sat with his pain and celebrated his joy, who'd loved his son without trying to replace the mother he'd lost, who'd shown him that hope wasn't betrayal, it was survival. "Marry me," he said. Vanessa's eyes went wide. "What?" "I know we haven't been together that long. I know there's no ring, and this isn't some romantic proposal, but I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to be careful or cautious or afraid. I want to build a life with you, officially, completely. I want Oliver to see what it looks like when two people choose each other every single day. I want to choose you, Vanessa. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Vanessa's face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." They kissed there in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of a 6-year-old's birthday party and the photos of a life that came before. And Daniel felt every part of his story coming together. The grief didn't disappear. The missing pieces didn't suddenly fill themselves in, but the sharp edges had been worn smooth by time and love, by showing up and staying open, by having the courage to let hope back in. When they finally pulled apart, Vanessa laughed through her tears. "We should probably tell Oliver he's getting a stepmom. Tomorrow, let him have tonight just being 6. "Fair enough." She laced her fingers through his. "Daniel? Yeah? Thank you for taking a chance on me, for letting me be part of this beautiful, complicated, messy family, for trusting me with your heart when you had every reason to keep it locked away. Thank you for seeing me, for asking the hard questions, for loving my son like he's yours." Daniel paused. "I never thought I'd have this again. This feeling of everything being exactly where it should be." "Me neither, but here we are. Here we are." They stood together in the quiet house, two people who'd found each other across the landscape of loss and loneliness, who'd chosen to build something new without destroying what came before. Outside, the spring evening was settling into twilight, the neighborhood quiet except for the sound of sprinklers and distant laughter. Upstairs, Oliver slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that he was loved by people who showed up, who stayed, who built a family out of broken pieces and second chances, and the quiet courage it took to keep hoping. And in the morning, they would wake up and do it all again, make pancakes, tell stories, navigate the beautiful chaos of being human and flawed and trying their best. Daniel would fix engines, and Vanessa would run her company, and Oliver would learn about the world with the enthusiasm of someone who felt safe enough to be curious. They would visit Sarah's grave and tell her about their news, including her in the celebration because she would always be part of their story. They would plan a small wedding, something intimate and meaningful, with Oliver as the ring bearer and Mrs. Chen crying happy tears in the front row. They would fumble and figure it out as they went, making mistakes and apologizing and trying again. Because that's what love was. Not the absence of pain or fear or uncertainty, but the commitment to stay anyway, to show up on the hard days and the easy ones, to build something real and lasting out of whatever materials life provided. Daniel had learned that grief doesn't end. It just becomes part of the landscape you navigate. But so does joy. So does love. So does the possibility of new beginnings growing up from the ruins of old endings. Standing in his living room with Vanessa's hand in his, Sarah's photo watching over them, and his son sleeping peacefully upstairs, Daniel finally understood what he'd been searching for all these years. Not a return to what was lost, not a perfect replacement for what he'd had before. Just this, the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of people choosing each other, of hearts brave enough to break open again, of love that honored the past while building toward the future. Hope hadn't disappeared when Sarah died. It had just been waiting, quietly and patiently, for Daniel to be ready to let it back in. And now, surrounded by the people who made his life full and meaningful and worth the risk, he was finally completely ready. The story of Daniel Brooks wasn't about forgetting or moving on. It was about learning to carry both grief and joy, memory and possibility, loss and love. It was about a father who showed up for his son every single day, even when it was hard. About a woman who asked the right questions and stayed for the complicated answers. About a child who learned that families could grow and change and still honor what came before. It was about ordinary people doing the extraordinary work of healing, of choosing hope over fear. Of believing that even when life breaks you open, new things can grow in the cracks. And in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.